panel. Oh, now we're live. Now we're live. Welcome, Osmonauts, to the official Osmosis bridging panel. We're here today to talk about bridges and bridging things. I don't know a lot about bridges, whether that be in the crypto realm or in the physical car pedestrian realm. But thankfully, Sunny is here from Osmosis to, help us with some of the more technical, tough kind of questions. I feel like today's panel is going to be, it's kind of like C-SPAN. It's going to be like your local government, putting on some type of panel thing. But hopefully we're going to make it a little bit more fun than just, watching a bunch of boring old people talk about things. Time will tell. Time will tell. We were supposed to be joined by Jack and Doe. I'm not sure if Jack is going to be here. Apparently it's 5 a.m. for Doe, and apparently he has a hard time waking up. But maybe they'll surprise us here in a little bit. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of things, Sonny, can you just give us a brief overview of just what is a bridge? Why is it an important thing, and why are we picking only one? Are we able to pick more than one?
Yeah, sure. What is a bridge? A bridge, in the context that we're talking about right now, is a hack until IBC takes over everything in the world. Really IBC is a bridge protocol as well. But what IBC is it's a very highly trustless, decentralized bridge protocol, but where it only has full light client security of both chains, and there's no additional security assumptions, but it comes at the cost of very high implementation overhead, where we would on something, if we wanted to build, one day I imagine that IBC will hit, every chain will have IBC, right? Ethereum will have IBC, Solana will have IBC. People are working on this stuff right now. There's an IBC implementation being built on Solana. There's an IBC implementation being built in Solidity. But it's hard because it involves writing light client verification in these other protocols. So we would have to write a full Tendermint light client in Solidity if we want full proper IBC security. And
a lot of work.
It is a lot of work there, and it is the end goal. But until we are there at that point, we need something more temporary that can satisfy our needs. And and we call these, this is what we'll call bridges, right? And now it does a little bit open the floodgates of how decentralized are we okay with, or how, some people, there's some bridges that are if you look at the bridge between Ethereum and Avalanche, from my understanding, it is pretty highly centralized. I don't have the full details on it, but everyone tells me that it's a couple of nodes. It's like a single SGX node that's just doing the relaying between them. And so, I'm hoping that in the Cosmos ecosystem, we can at least do a little bit better than that. And so, we want to figure out a way of getting a pretty decentralized, even if it's not IBC level, but highly secure, decentralized bridge between, starting with the Ethereum ecosystem to Cosmos, just because Ethereum has, the most interesting assets right now. And yeah, has all the money. And so we need to get those assets into Cosmos and, onto Osmosis and into other spots within Cosmos. And it seems that a lot of teams have sort of either differing views on how bridges should be constructed, or just in general saw it as a very lucrative opportunity to build a bridge protocol. And we ended up in this situation where we have sort of multiple teams multiple projects sort of eyeing to be a bridge provider between the Ethereum and Cosmos ecosystems, and who we'll talk with today. Now, can we have multiple bridges, right? I think that's a great question.
token.
I mean, yes. Like, so there's two. So let's talk about even between Ethereum and Cosmos or Osmosis specifically. Let's say we can support multiple bridges. The challenge is that the tokens that are bridged over unique bridges are not fungible with each other. So if we so it's it's similar to an IBC actually. You know how we have different channels. We try our best to abstract this away from the users. So at least when you're using Osmosis's UI and stuff, you never have to think about channels. But
I love not thinking about it.
Yeah, but it is we want to make this simple, which is sort of a key theme of today, I guess. But tokens that come over different channels are not fungible with each other, and tokens even in IBC that come via different routes. So let's say you bring regen tokens, right? You send regen tokens from regen to Osmosis versus you send them from regen to Cosmos Hub to Osmosis. These two tokens are now not fungible with each other.
My little mind is being blown right now. I'm
so this is a challenge when they're not fungible with each other, because now you're going to have two different types of regen tokens on Osmosis, and it'll just be all confusing and hard for it'll be weird. And so that's why with Osmosis we took the explicit approach where we said we are going to only prioritize single hop IBC tokens. So if you have regen sitting on the Cosmos Hub, don't send it directly to Osmosis. Please send it back to regen and then to Osmosis. This way, we're saying we only want one canonical representation of regen on Osmosis. And we're able to do this because there's a very obvious shelling point for what's the canonical representation, which is, the best IB. It'll be the direct connection. Everyone will be like, okay, yep. We're not going to accept, if we have a bunch of choices between direct connection, routed through Hub, routed through Akashnecker, routed through Terra, it's okay. The shelling point, the one that the obvious answer is let's just use the direct connection. Now, if Osmosis ran its own bridge, for example, that would probably also be the shelling point where, okay, that's the obvious one to choose. But now we chose, as the development team, we chose the explicit, thing of saying we don't want to build a bridge ourselves, and we don't want to operate a bridge ourselves either, because bridges are hard. And for example, we looked at Thorchain, and Thorchain had their bridge hack a couple over the summer. Not criticizing them for having the hack, because mistakes happen, but I think it's just we saw that and we're like, okay, you know what, we don't have time to focus on a DEX and bridges at the same time. We'd rather outsource bridges.
Nobody got time for that.
Yeah, so we'd rather focus all of our time just on let's make the best DEX and DeFi platform and find someone else to provide us bridging. But that means though, and so that way we said we're only going to integrate one bridge protocol, which is IBC, and someone else has to act like a translator and adapter for us to turn other bridges into IBC for us. Yeah, so that's sort of how we got into this point where now it's like, okay, if Osmosis itself is not going to run a bridge, but now we have multiple chains, how do we, there's no shelling point anymore. How do we decide which bridges is going to be the canonical version? Why do we need a canonical version in the first place, right? So, I talked about it'll be kind of silly if there's multiple regen tokens, and I feel it feels very obvious to people that okay, in the IBC world it'd be silly, it would be multiple. The same reasons apply just for other bridged assets as well, right? So we're gonna have, so we see it as sort of two main reasons why multiple we want single canonical versions. One is it comes down to simplicity and user experience. So Osmosis, we're going to compete with centralized exchanges, right? That has always been the goal. And if you look at a centralized exchange, you go on Coinbase, you don't have like 5 different types of ETH, right? You look at the list, it's like Bitcoin, ETH, Litecoin, Dogecoin, whatever the list is, right? But they have this list.
There's already enough items. We don't need any other ones.
We don't need 5 versions of every item. That will be so confusing. So
keep it simple.
So on the app.osmosis.zone front end, which is a single front end of the Osmosis chain, there are other front ends of the Osmosis chain, right? There's the Cosmos Station wallet is actually one of the biggest, most popular ways that people use Osmosis. There's also like Rango Exchange, Ping.pub, Citadel One. There's all these different front ends, so there's all these different front ends, and they might have different design goals as a product, but the Osmosis.zone front end, which is maintained by Chainapsis, and it has the design goal of being as simple for users as possible. And so the Osmosis.zone front end, we want to pick one canonical version that will be displayed as ETH or as USDC or as DAI. And that's one, is from the UX side. Prefixes are very ugly. You can go look at you can go look at like Saber or something on Solana, and it's just like this hodgepodge of 20 different prefixes, and it's just very hard to understand. And Solana actually helps solve this. People don't realize that Solana itself chooses a canonical bridge. So the Solana Foundation, Solana Labs puts out a token list and that tells apps suggests apps how to display assets, and they call Wormhole ETH as ETH, right? So a chain that is it's
just as good as ETH. It's the most authentic version.
Exactly. So Solana basically made this decision on behalf of a lot of the apps, and the apps on Solana can choose to not follow that, but that is the decision that Solana Labs suggests to them, and it becomes a sort of shelling point. And so one thing is people ask so it's we're talking about credible neutrality here, right? Solana is a neutral L1, and even they are making the decision for UX purposes to choose one canonical version. I think that it is completely within the right bounds for an app chain like Osmosis to select one as the canonical version for UX purposes. Now, the other piece that's worth noting, the other thing that makes Osmosis's situation also special beyond just the UX is also liquidity and incentives fragmentation. So if we have 5 different forms of ETH on Osmosis, what that will do is it will, that liquidity that could all be in one pool, and the more, the way X times Y equals K AMMs work is the more liquidity in a pool, the better slippage and better pricing that traders get. But if we split all this liquidity across 5 different pools, we're going to end up with worse trading for everyone, which is just bad for Osmosis.
Not good for
and then we have to choose how do we assign incentives to each one? And I think that so I think that you could do it off of how much liquidity is in a pool or something, but then that kind of fix it. I think that Osmosis should be a little bit more strategic on how it assigns incentives, or it should be using incentives not just as a way of rewarding current liquidity, but as a way of nudging liquidity in the direction it wants liquidity to go.
Wait, we should be strategic about incentives? I thought you just voted yes on everything. I thought that was the Osmosis way. No?
I think that's going to have to start changing pretty soon. I think the first 30, 40 assets that were listed on Osmosis, congrats, you guys were the early adopters of IBC. But I think going forward, Osmosis should probably start to be a little bit more strategic on what it approves incentives for.
We can't just be throwing out Osmo left and right.
Especially once the third inning comes, right? Because, once the third inning hits, the Osmo incentives are going to go down.
Oh my God, the third inning.
The third inning.
I'm kind of excited for the third inning. Well, thank you for that brief, that nice overreach on why we need one bridge. We need it to be simple. We need it to be simple for the pleb guys like me. I can't have 10 versions of ETH. I can't have all these confusing things. And that's what brings us to today's show. I feel like we're kind of on like one of those like 1960s like dating shows where we as Osmosis are, the bachelorette, and we're, asking some bachelors some various things and seeing how they respond. And then after the stream, hopefully we all go home and think on it very hardly and then come to a decision. Sonny, do we have someone? We haven't really thought about who we're going to bring up first to kind of give us their bridge sales pitch. Is there anyone that you want to hear from first? I know we have a full packed room of people ready to go, but I don't know if we've actually given a specific order. Do we want to like roll some dice? Do we just want to bring someone up? Should we go in alphabetical order?
That sounds fair.
All right. I think first up then might be our friends from Axelar. You guys pick the name Axelar. It starts with an A. Sergey, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Oh, not too bad at all. So glad to have you here.
Awesome. This is going to be fun.
I think it'll be fun. So I think we're just going to go through. I think we're going to give each bridge a little bit of time just to, tell us about your bridge, why you think it's the best one. And then after that, we'll probably have, Sonny ask you some tough hardball things. And if I can think of a cool softball question to throw your way, I might pop it out there as well. But Serge, I will let you take the stage.
Wait, Cody, just a quick question on the format. Are we going to, after everyone does it, are we going to have a Q&A at the end? Should I save the questions for then?
I feel like it might be kind of nice to just, since we have Serge up on stage, maybe let him have, give us your full pitch, Serge. And then afterwards, since we're just on the topic of Axelar, maybe we throw a couple Q&As now.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right,
I guess,
Serge.
how long do you want the pitches to be? What's the...
I feel like maybe shorter might be a little bit better. I know we have 5 to get through, so maybe if you could do like 5 minutes, like somewhere in that realm, and then we can have some time for Q&A at the back half. I feel like if we go over that, this bridging panel will never end, right? Let's just be honest. I know we could talk all day about it, but I know everyone on the internet's like, I don't have time for this, right?
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good.
Maybe.
So, I guess before, we get into the Axelar and what it does, just a little bit of background on myself for, everyone who's not familiar with myself or our team. So Sergey, my background is distributed systems, cryptography. I kind of worked on everything over the years from software-defined networking and routing protocols to building cryptographic protocols, standards for the ecosystem, including, standardization of BLS signatures and things such as that. Myself and my co-founder, we worked on the Algorand protocol previously, so we helped to design it and take it to the market and launch it. And afterwards, we saw the ecosystem evolve to be more and more multi-chain. Cosmos and Polkadot were pioneering some of the thought around it, and we kind of realized that the problem of interoperability is actually really hard. It requires a very dedicated effort, dedicated team, and the world-class team to solve it. And so myself and my co-founder Yorgos, we spun up another venture, Axelar. It's actually not that old, right? We've been building this a little over a year and a half. We've gone through a series of fundraisers. We've built a team. We're now over 25 people full-time on the team. The team has deep roots in cryptography, distributed systems, consensus mechanisms, and a number of just amazing and fascinating people and technologists. So that's about us. We recently announced that we're beginning the rollout of our main network, right? And I can get into the details what that means. But it's been a pretty fun journey to date. So now let me tell you a little bit about what Axelar is, right? So on the very high level, you can think of Axelar as a decentralized overlay network, right? That connects different ecosystems with the purpose of enabling composability and interaction across various blockchain stacks. So the core technology that we're building actually consists of two separate layers. There is the Axelar network itself, which is a decentralized Cosmos-based network. So it runs based on Cosmos SDK, and we kind of modify it for this cross-chain functionalities that we're enabling. And the network is open. It is a permissionless network. Anybody can join. Anybody can run a validator, submit transactions for cross-chain requests, perform relay functionalities, and so on and so forth. So everything is completely open. And very importantly, on top of the network, we're also building a set of services and APIs that make it easy for the applications like Osmosis to interact with different ecosystems, right? And so some of the basic services you can think about is, relaying of transactions, right? How do you send a transaction where the user only needs to pay, on the source chain, and all the other fees and all the other intermediary steps that the transaction goes through are taken care of on the back end, right? The finalization, the relay pieces of a transaction, fees being paid. So all of that is a sort of set of services that build on top of the network. And at the very edge of it is the simple SDKs and APIs that we're exposing to the application developers to make it easy to interact and compose with all these different ecosystems. And so, just to give you an example, what some of the core functionalities of the network itself, right? And I think it's important to understand that those functionalities actually can only be solved at the core networking layer if you want to do them effectively and efficiently. And the core ones are like routing. Okay, so what we have done at the Axelar network layer is you can think of it as a router across different ecosystems where it's easy to onboard new chains. So for EVM chains, you can actually run through a handful of commands on the network in order to make a connection to an EVM chain. And even on our existing mainnet, we have already onboarded 5 different EVM chains. We're setting up IBC connections across them and Cosmos chains, and so that's really straightforward. And what routing also allows you to do is it allows you to enable users to interact with cross-chain functionalities in the same way as they would interact with centralized solutions, right? So what I mean by this is the following. You can actually request Axelar network to give you a specific deposit address, let's say on the source chain, that's going to be linked with a specific account on the destination chain. Okay, so what you're doing in that process, you actually creating a routing path that the Axelar network can execute on, but the user only needs to send a transaction on the source chain to the deposit address in an arbitrary way, right? So you can send it from MetaMask, you can send it from a centralized exchange, you can send it from any wallet that you want. And because it's a regular transaction, it goes to a regular deposit address. Something needs to actually know how it needs to be routed to the destination chain, right? And so the Axelar network can execute these functions for you, deliver it, and the set of services can relay and pay all the other fees in the middle. The other big piece that we're building in the network is the translation across different ecosystems. Right? So what I mean by this is the following. We are IBC built our EVM module around it. We also building a Bitcoin module for various other proof of work chains. And at the network layer, what that means is that as new connections are added, those connections automatically get to benefit from all the other previously interconnected ecosystems, right? So because it's not pairwise connections, so you don't have to go and update all the paths and routing across them. One command on the network and like one integration allows you to benefit and compound with all the other previously connected chains. So, and all of these chains can speak different languages, right? And serve the Axelar network then serves as a translation layer that helps you unify and forward messages from one type of packet format like IBC to another type of packet format like EVM or Bitcoin or whatever else you want. And and I think a final piece that we're heavily focused on is of course security, right? I think no matter what, as Sunny was saying earlier, whenever you're talking about cross-chain, you want to minimize the number of assumptions you're making in the middle, right? So direct connections are great, but kind of hard to build. But you want to minimize and trust the network, which is just as decentralized as some of the source of destination chains that you're working with. So we have an open network. It's based on Cosmos SDK. Our validators are pretty much the same validator set as you see in other top Cosmos chains or other proof of stake chains. So you actually trust in the same validator set, and down the line for all of these operations. And we're heavily invested in optimizing security of our smart contracts. We have cryptographic optimizations that we're doing, from threshold cryptography, BLS and things like that. And so, we have a pretty deep roadmap. We are pretty committed to this, and I would say it is one of the hardest problems for the ecosystem, but that's kind of what makes us tick and what makes it exciting for us to work on it. So maybe I'll pause here for now.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Tony, you want to start, or should I jump in?
Just jump in, Sonny.
Cool. I just wanted to say that, okay, so, one of the things that, one of the most exciting things about Axelar for me personally has just been the deposit addresses. So just, I just want to make sure everyone gets how cool this feature is. The idea is that, look, so there's two types of wallets in the world. I call them smart wallets and dumb wallets. Smart wallets are the ones that you can tell a transaction to and it signs them. Dumb wallets is all they know how to do is send money, right? And so think about when you go deposit coins to a centralized exchange. It doesn't pop up your MetaMask and says, oh, sign this thing to deposit to the centralized exchange. It's like, no, here's an address and a QR code, and just send coins to this account and it will show up in the centralized exchange. And I can have a dumb wallet on my phone, like Trust Wallet or something, no wallet connect, nothing, and just scan the QR code and send coins. And exactly. I think that is such a cool UX. And the other use case, the other big dumb, there's a big dumb wallet in the set of dumb wallets in the world, which are called centralized exchanges. Because when I withdraw from a centralized exchange, I can't have it do a weird fancy transaction. All I can do is say, here's a withdrawal address. But with Axelar's deposit address system, I can have it I can take tokens from ETH from Coinbase and just withdraw to the deposit address that Axelar generates for me, and the coins will automatically show up in my Osmosis account. No, I don't ever have to have I never even have to have MetaMask installed at any point in this entire workflow. And I think that is if our goal is seriously to compete with centralized exchanges, I think that's the UX that people have come to expect at this point. And so I think that's, for me, has been one of the big things. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit so everyone gets that.
Yeah.
And what's cool is Axelar supports both. They support both the deposit address method and the more normal smart wallet, it'll suggest it to MetaMask kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, kind of going back to kind of why we decided to actually build this, right? Give you a little bit of history. I think it actually started precisely with that problem that we did not want to limit ourselves to MetaMask users, period, right? I think, if you look at the distribution of users, right, then you're talking about maybe 20 million MetaMask users, and you're talking about hundreds of millions of users across centralized exchanges, regular dumb wallets, right, and so on and so forth, and mobile wallets, and the list goes on. So, and I think being able to interact with hundreds of millions of users versus 12 million users that only support smart functionalities and the smart wallets, I think it's a huge distribution strategy, right? And I think I think UX is definitely a lot easier. Anybody can interact with it, and kind of as an application or as a DEX that you're building, you have access to 10 times more users, which I think is fantastic.
So Spaceman Dev has a good question in the comments, which is how does this work technically? Who has custody of the deposit addresses?
Yeah, so great question. So that's exactly where kind of the Axelar network comes in, right? So the Axelar network, you can think of it as a decentralized network where validators run our cross-chain protocol, right? And so the way that it works is that validators collectively observe information on different chains that come into various Axelar generated accounts. Think of it that way, right? So when you want to when you want to send a transaction from a source chain to a destination chain, you call an API. This API gives you a specially crafted address. And that address, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be linked to the destination chain and a destination address where you want your funds to end up, right? So, and in this process, the Axelar validators observe the deposits that come into this deposit address, and then they finalize it through the finality gadgets, and then they collectively execute, a transaction that needs to be posted on the destination chain. Right, so the validators collectively are responsible for running this protocol in the same way as you have, validators that are producing blocks in the underlying, proof of stake chain or other chains. Right, so yeah. Sunny, you're on mute.
Sorry, thanks. So, do I have to go? If I want to do this, do I have to go make a transaction on the Axelar chain before I can use the deposit address?
So right now the answer is yes, you have to generate a transaction. But what we have done is we actually build a set of microservices that anybody can do this without even having Axelar tokens or anything else, right? So it's a service that we expose where all the transaction fees are sort of subsidized, right? Same as transaction fees on the destination chain, they're all taken care of by our set of services. You make a call, this API just returns you the address. You don't have to have Axelar tokens. You don't have to interact with the network. So from your point of view, you effectively just executing a call that gives you this deposit address, how it was generated. There's nothing for you to do other than integrate in this function call on the front end, and you don't have to interact with the network underneath it.
So every time someone does this, it generates a new. So do deposit addresses ever expire? Can I use a deposit address I was given a year ago and still deposit to it today? And do we have to create a new account on Ethereum every single time we use a deposit address?
Great question. So we do generate a new account every time, but it doesn't have to be, right? So essentially what a deposit address is a function of the asset that you want to transfer, the destination chain, right? And the account where you want to receive the funds, right? So technically, once you generate it, then the Axelar network knows of this path and knows that the funds arriving on the source chain needs to be routed to this destination address and a destination account. And so, you can keep on sending funds there, and it will show up at the destination chain. We are deciding to do this right now because we have to keep an eye on a certain account in order to process this relay functionality. So we set some timeouts there, maybe a day, maybe a couple of days. It could be 6 months or whatever you decide as an application layer. However long you want to expire those accounts, right? And so it's the same decision as exchanges have to decide, right? Like, when do I give you a new account? When do I generate? When you click a deposit button, or when can you reuse the old account? And so you have the same flexibility here. You can either reuse the account, because once it's generated, it's linked at the network layer, right? So you can reuse it, you can relay it, you can replay it, or you can generate a fresh one if you want. Right now, we encourage people to just generate fresh ones so they don't end up sending like wrong tokens to the wrong destination chains as an educational experience.
Yeah, and so you use some sort of like create to magic to make that work, where the account, like you don't have to. I have to wait for the Axelar multi-sig contract to be deployed before?
No. So okay. No. So that's exactly the point where you call the network, right? Within a few seconds, it gives you the address. You just send there and forget. Okay, and then the set of microservices later will actually deploy the contract corresponding to that address, right? Lock the asset or burn the asset, whatever it needs to be done with it. And you as a user just send the transaction and forget about it. And so the contract is deployed after already the transaction is sent.
One question. So one thing I noticed is when I was using the demo, I still have to sign a message with Kepler before. Doesn't that kind of almost defeat the point of the why do I have to sign a message before I can use it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess no good reason other than the fact that we want to sort of authenticate and rate limit users just a little bit right now from our microservices. We're still like in the demo mode. I think in the early days when we kind of opened up the app, we actually saw some people like abuse our services and do like, some denial of service things and stuff like that. So, a lot of this can be at some point, if you want to protect the network, how do you protect Osmosis? You have, Kepler, right? Like that's sort of Kepler, and people have to send transactions. So if you want to just go and relay things through the network, then effectively, a user signs in with Kepler, and that used as an authentication method, and you don't need to do anything else, right? But because right now people go through our front end, we want to prevent some people that try to abuse the network, let's say, for now. But there's nothing inherent to that, and that can be dropped. And we actually didn't have it originally. We kind of introduced it as a temporary measure for now.
Got it. And then one last question that a couple of people in the chat had was about how can we ensure that Axelar will remain decentralized? So I think out of the different bridges, I think Axelar has approximately over 60% of the tokens in the hands of the development team plus early investors. So, and one thing I've noticed is that if you go on MintScan, the Axelar validator set is relatively smaller than many other chains, and it just how did these validators get tokens? How is this distribution done? And then what's your plans on decentralizing the token distribution further?
Yeah. So Gregor, so first of all, I think it's incorrect to say that the team and the investors have over 60%, right? I think between the team and the operational company, there's something like 30% of the token, right? And then the investors are separate, right? Like we don't control them in some sense, and there's a foundation that has I think close to 40% of the tokens that are used for various community programs, right? And it has an independent board and so on and so forth. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind too. We actually, still rolling out the network, right? I think, as I said, given the, we started building, and it's a little over, a year ago. We just started to roll out our validator set. On the test network, we have close to 100 validators, right, that participate in various forms, running various chains. Only about a month ago, we started the rollout of the main network. The token distributions itself actually didn't even happen right across a wider community yet, and so validators were kind of loaned some tokens to participate, and they were staked with. And the plan going forward is that over the coming months and weeks, we're continuously onboarding new validators. You can already see that the validator set is consists of all the players that you see supporting Osmosis, Cosmos, other proof of stake chains, right? From Cosmos Station to Figment to Chorus and so on and so forth. And, they're participating with it. And so we're going to be onboarding more validators. We're going to be continuing performing token distributions and, things like that. And there is an Axelar Foundation, which is, an independent entity, and it will have its kind of a governance protocol underneath it that will also facilitate changes right to the protocol, same as Osmosis and Cosmos, where people will vote on decisions, and protocol can adapt those decisions. And we as a team will be one of the contributors, right, and one of the developers of this. But there are many other players, and I guess just to give you an example of the power of our community. So if you go to axelarscan.io, right, I think it's one of the amazing explorers that our community has built. It was built by the community, right? We didn't have anything to do with it. We gave some feedback to the folks that are building it. It gives you all the visibility in terms of validators, how they participate in their quality, uptime requirements, and so on and so forth. And so, I think we have very strong community that will continue helping us build this along the way.
Nice. Well, Serge, thank you so much. Are we on questions now? Jeremy Parrish. How long does it take to transfer tokens over the bridge? How much are bridging fees?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of the latency, whenever you're going from a source chain to a destination chain, you always have to wait on the latency, on the source chain in some sense for the transaction to clear, right? There is certain latency, you're inquiring on the destination chain as the transaction is posted. And on the Axelar network itself, maybe we add, an additional 20 or 30 seconds as we finalize the transaction. On top of this, all of that can be shaved and be, very, very low down the line. The latency with Axelar approach can be effectively just a source chain latency, right? Plus maybe a few blocks on Axelar and the destination chain latency. So it's as close as optimal as you'll get when you go from one chain to another without introducing additional trust assumptions. In terms of fees, I would say that right now our model is flexible, right? Like I said, we're just starting to roll out we don't have strong attachments, I would say, to the fee models. I think our focus is to just continue rolling out the network and build the best technology. And I think the fees is something we currently we set it to be, I think, 0.1% of the network. But we actually revisited it. I think we're gonna, cap it. We're gonna remove this percentage. So all of that is still been modified as we continue the rollout.
Cool. Sounds good. I think we're gonna have to scoot along and just, for the sake of time, that'll be my job here. I'm just gonna interrupt everybody and play everybody up.
An hour and a half, by the way. I fully expect this to flow over. I think I cleared out the next 4 hours just in case. I'm not even joking.
I love it. I think at the end of it, if there's still some folks here, we might try to have everybody up on board and just go through some community questions. But this is speed dating. This is speed dating.
Everyone first, and then we should do a lot of questions at the end.
I like that. I'm going to bring everybody up, and we'll let them give their whole pitch. Sonny, if you have a couple hardball things you want to ask them, I say we just do that and move on. Oh my gosh, now we have everybody up. What's going on? What are we doing? Do we just want to keep going in order, in alphabetical order? I believe our friends from Gravity Bridge would probably be next. If we want to bring the Gravity Bridge folks up on the stage. Gravity Bridge, tell us why you should be our bridge. What makes you special?
Well, that's a good question. So about 2 years ago when we started design of Gravity Bridge, so first of all, hi, I'm Justin, CTO, co-founder of Althea, and also lead developer on Gravity Bridge. And we originally started building Gravity for Althea, to bring tokens across for people buying and selling bandwidth on their home routers. And so this created a few needs. We needed it to be efficient. We needed it to be really simple. And most importantly, we couldn't get too bogged down trying to implement every bell and whistle. We had to make a reliable bridge because we really wanted to use this for a very long time. And so before we started designing Gravity Bridge, we took a look at all the other bridge designs and said, where did this fail? Where did this screw up? How did this vulnerability happen? And the answer was that people would get very ambitious implementation-wise. They would add too many layers of abstraction. They would try and add, sort of an excess of features without really figuring out how to make them rock solid. And so we set out to build a radically simple, radically reusable bridge. And like what I mean by that is that there are obviously at least half a dozen different bridges in the Cosmos ecosystem by now, implemented to run on Cosmos SDK chains. But Gravity Bridge, the protocol, is being used by half a dozen different chains now. Whereas all the other bridge protocols are typically used by one, I think at most two chains, simply because they are too complex for anybody to want to integrate. You're building it for yourself rather than for the community. And so this is what I'm really proud of achieving with Gravity Bridge is radical simplicity and reduced complexity. And I think the biggest example here is that if my reading of all of the RFP proposals is correct, we're the only bridge in this chat in this call right now that is not where the Solidity contract is not upgradable, which means that the only people you have to trust are the validators. So they have full control of the bridge. There is no secret multi-sig set that can update the code. There is really sort of nothing but the validators as far as control over the bridge. And this results in very simple security assumptions. Notice, like we're coming back to simplicity. It's just the validators. There's no separation between the validator set and the people in the bridge. And it's okay. Yes. So the one place where we sort of increased complexity a bit is that we added batching and we really focused on making the fee market work. And this is something that I think is important because while we have to skip the spinning rims in the name of making something that really works well and is really reliable, the fee market is very important. You can't really sort of hand wave away fees, because fees on Ethereum are big. So take, for example, Axelar's deposit address design. If you have a bunch of people send like 50 cents or $2 of ETH to different addresses, it'll cost more in fees to collect all of the money from all of those addresses to make the bridge solvent than the deposit is worth. And this is a hard problem to solve. And it's one that we really considered and found that we couldn't solve in a way that we were happy with. Somebody has to pay the gas for that. And we, how should I put it? All bridge protocols eventually have to figure out how to be solvent in terms of Ethereum fees. Now, some can put that off longer than others, but Gravity Bridge is solvent already. So the fee market is developed, it exists. We're not relying on any one mysterious person to be the one honest participant. There is a mature fee market where everybody can relay transactions and everybody can participate, and there's no single point of failure. And I really like to highlight that because I think that's one of the most important themes in the design of Gravity Bridge, is that we made something that's simple, robust, straightforward, and most of all is in heavy use by the Cosmos ecosystem. So this is a bridge that is for more than just us. It is for anybody in the Cosmos ecosystem that needs a bridge, whether it be to use the Gravity Bridge blockchain or just to integrate the code. And I think that's the strongest endorsement that we've that we achieved the design goals I set out with. Yeah, I think that's a good place to pause and start sort of taking questions and discussing other points.
I love it. Justin, thank you so much for coming on down. Bachelorette number 2, the Gravity Bridge. Sunny, do we have any quick questions for Justin, our main Gravity Bridge guy?
Yeah. So I guess some things to start with is one of the things right now with the Gravity Bridge is it is sort of designed for a single EVM. I think most of the other bridges right now support like sort of support connecting to multiple EVMs at the same time. What is sort of the plans to make Gravity Bridge? Obviously, like I mentioned, Ethereum is definitely the highest value thing to connect to, but especially if our goal is to be the interchain DEX, we need to be able to connect to all the EVM chains, whether it's Avalanche or BSC or whatever. So what's the plans and timeline and roadmap for that look like?
Yeah, so we're hoping to have support for multiple EVM chains by the end of this year, and I think that's a fairly and I think that timeline has some wiggle room in it. Even you see, I like to achieve the things I say. The reason we started with only one chain is, it comes back to the lack of upgradability on Gravity.Sol. We believe that to be a critical security issue, and we didn't want upgradability, which means we had to get that absolutely right. So we couldn't exactly. So we had to focus our efforts pre-launch on making sure that everything was solid and well built, and now we can move on to expanding to multiple EVM chains. Using that same, highly optimized, highly audited, very compact contract. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And in fact, I actually think progress there is going faster than I expected. We have some really great community contributors, both from other chains using Gravity Bridge and from the larger community, the larger Cosmos SDK community.
Cool. Do you not think that I don't know, 1 year does seem like a little bit, by end of the year seems like a bit of a long time, especially, given the pace that Osmosis would like to go. Is there any way to make that faster?
It could probably be quite a bit faster. I'm giving a very conservative timeline. I mean, so let's see. The hardest part is figuring out the relaying for all of this and making sure that it's nice for validators. Everything else would take less than 2 months. So it's more a matter of giving a conservative timeline as far as launch and testing than it is a matter of where's it really going to take this long. So we're just working on our first Gravity Grants program. We're spinning up and bringing more developers into the ecosystem. And once again, we're always focused on making sure that things sort of work well and are solid before we move forward. So we're taking some time to do some cleanup before we really start in on multi EVM destination development. But yeah, I mean, I guess summer's a little soon, but late summer, early fall, we'll pretty much have something that you can run by then. I mean, the question is more like, okay, now we've got to do any auditing that's necessary, think about what else needs to happen, and get a release out. So it's definitely possible. In fact, my philosophy is always that you can build anything on any budget in any amount of time. The question is just exactly what you want and how much you're willing to give up for it.
Cool. I guess another one is, this is something I feel like I'm not actually fully clear on, is the Gravity Bridge, is Gravity focused on token transfers, or can I also do other sorts of transfers other sort of cross-chain communication as well? Two examples that I think that we are very interested in with regard to Osmosis is, one is NFTs, and then the other is some sort of interchain accounts style thing, because what we want is the Osmosis DAO community pool should be able to start doing things on Ethereum. Particularly, the big one that we want to do is have it own the ENS name for osmosis.eth.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So so the first question was, can we do NFTs? And we've been working closely with Stargaze, who has been contributing support. How should I put this? So I want to be clear here that the Stargaze team is developing NFT support on Gravity Bridge. So they are contributing, they're big contributors in our community, and they are working closely with us to do the development work for actual NFT support. We just merged the Solidity contract for that a few days ago. Obviously, it needs to go through like revisions and auditing, but we are moving fairly quickly. And I think NFTs is definitely an end of summer thing at this rate. And that's once again, that's taking into time to find auditors and get all that done, which can be a bit difficult these days. There are a lot of projects that want audits. The other question, there was one other thing I want to say. The NFT expansion to Gravity Bridge also is helping us prove out. We built in special functionality that lets us add new functionality on top. Functionality is vague. We built in a system into Gravity.Sol that lets us add new functionality despite the contract not being upgradable. So this is something big that I think is a real victory, that this is playing out so quickly after launch, that yes, we can have our cake and eat it too. So your second question was about Osmosis owning its own ENS name and more generic operations. So Gravity Bridge is fully capable of doing sort of arbitrary actions on Ethereum. And something like owning and moving around an ENS name is something that we can expand and add support for without too much trouble. We don't even need to write any new Solidity code for it. Well, a little, just a little widget. Now, stuff like arbitrary price oracles and metadata oracles is also something that we've been sort of starting to explore. How do you bring over metadata for all your ERC20 tokens and provide a sort of an IBC window into the ERC20 metadata world is something that we're really thinking about, and thinking about how to integrate with, an IBC metadata module, which everybody seems to have their eye on as a interchain accounts thing.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Hold on, before we continue, I'm live in the super professional broadcast studio, and I think we have another guest from Gravity Bridge who's going to pop on up. Deborah, are you there? She's here. Deborah, welcome aboard.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to jump in and kind of put an underline on a few points here too, and kind of describe how we look at the business relationships of Dustin, of course, has done the technical work of Gravity Bridge, and just an amazing undertaking. But I think it's really important to share the viewpoint that we have on this critical piece of infrastructure, right? That it is actually infrastructure, that we're looking to be a neutral bridge instead of adding DeFi applications or things that might be competitive to other Cosmos blockchains. We exist, and our business proposition is this bridge is going to work. It's going to be reliable, and the people and customers like Osmosis won't have to worry about it. That's going to be our biggest proposition, is that, hey, you're going to connect with this bridge. It's going to be a neutral place where you can traverse your traffic across. Applications, of course, will be built to suit, and we have a large sort of different community that is building on that. We want to, of course, distribute Grav to those folks for building on top of it. But the reliability and kind of the multi-year way that we look at the infrastructure is the best business benefit that we can give Osmosis. We built it as a bridge for the Cosmos. It's been built over several years with key community members participating, together with a lot of the like the Interchain Foundation and many members of the Cosmos Hub and Peggy JV that contributed to it. There's been forks of it as well too, which continue to improve the code. So I wanted to sort of give that kind of longer overarching perspective, and things like some of the work that Axelar has done to develop the deposit addresses. Those things can be implemented as well, right? So I think let's look at, if we look at just the brig architecture itself, that you find a kind of a solid multi-year perspective here.
I think one additional question I want to ask right now, and then we can add more later, is so you guys are also still working on your Althea product as well. How do you guys plan on splitting time and resources between Althea and Gravity Bridge?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great question, and I think it really speaks to the work that we're doing right now, and actually setting up what we call Gravity Growth and Gravity Groups and governance and all these work actually to support the developer community around the Gravity Bridge, right? It has been a multi-development process, and we're going to continue to put that framework and process in place so that it isn't just a single team. I mean, it's almost like a public infrastructure or public works project, right? You wouldn't want necessarily just like two people building your water or your sewer system, right? Could turn into a shit show. So what you really want is many different projects that are incentivized, that maybe are also utilizing the bridge on the other side to be concerned and aligned with that bridge health, right? And that's what you see with any kind of like public infrastructure, municipal project, right? You have like a department and then many different entities that participate in it.
Have municipal projects been the most well-known for like efficiency and speed of development? There's a building across the street from me right now that I'm pretty sure has been under development for the last 4 years.
I will say that they do a fairly good job of running sewer systems, right? Those are those things that kind of are not glamorous. They're not sexy. Mm-hmm. They're just pipes. They need them to work. They traverse our water systems. Shared infrastructure like that we all know that we need is a much different proposition than glitzy infrastructure that we want, right? And there's a big kind of distinction there. And I think that's what's really important about how we view, and I think everyone should view, bridges, is they're just pipes and necessary infrastructure that we all need to contribute to and be aligned with to see that health. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any last things that we want to ask Deborah and Justin, or should we keep this bridge combo rolling?
I think we can ask more at the end.
Okay, we'll ask more. Deborah, Justin, thank you guys so much for popping up and chatting. I'm sorry I'm ousting everybody out. Don't hate the player, all right? Hate time and the fact that we have a finite amount of it. All right, next up, Bachelorette number 3. Our friends from Nomad. Nomad, come on down. Welcome to the stage.
Hello. 3 is the magic number, so I'm excited to be Bachelor number 3.
That's my favorite number.
Perfect. Off to a good start. I'm Pranay. I'm one of the co-founders of Nomad, and
Hello,
Nomad
Pranay.
is It's a novel interoperability protocol that leverages an optimistic mechanism. The idea here is that we want to increase the security and lower the cost of cross-chain messaging by not having to do a ton of heavyweight work with validators or with light clients. I can't speak for everybody on the Nomad team, but I'm low-key in IBC Maxi as well. And I have a vision of the future being connected as an interchain via trustless channels. But until IBC can be deployed easily and with little developer overhead on many chains, we have to kind of figure out what is the next most kind of trust minimized system we can build on. And so the way I think about it is that in cross-chain messaging, it's a multivariate trade-off space where there are three primary parameters. And those are security, cost, and speed. And so custodial solutions optimize for speed and low cost, but sacrifice on security. And heavier weight systems like header relays optimize for security and speed, but often incur high gas costs or are hard to deploy. What Nomad does is it chooses the third kind of trade-off where we optimize for security and low cost, but sacrifice a little bit of speed. And so there is no free lunch, similar to the scalability trilemma that we encountered in the previous infrastructure cycle. Everybody's going to come and say, I have the best thing since sliced bread. It solves all of your problems. But the key thing is there are hidden trade-offs being made, and we want to be very explicit about what they are. And in the case of Nomad, there is a mild latency of about 30 minutes from Ethereum, particularly because Ethereum is a slower chain with expensive block space. But this latency would exist and be smaller for other chains as well. But the reason we have chosen to trade off on latency is because interoperability is security is the most important thing in interoperability, because bridges as a word betrays what is actually happening under the hood. With the token bridge, you're actually interacting with a synthetic asset exchange where you're locking assets on one side and minting a synthetic IOU on the other, on the destination chain. And so if that IOU ever gets depegged, meaning that the underlying assets are gone, then you're holding worthless paper. And so our opinion here is it's worth waiting a little bit longer in order to make sure that those tokens and data that is being escrowed and vouched for on the sending chain is escrowed securely. And so in sum, I want to kind of focus on one thing here, which is that all of these teams are good teams that are building really strong products, but all the other teams are focused on building some form of a multi-sig or validator-based bridge. Nomad is the only solution on this panel that is reducing the overhead and increasing the security by not running a validator-based system. So I want to kind of cover three main value propositions of Nomad, which are security, scalability, and readiness. In terms of security, as I mentioned earlier, it is paramount. So we changed the trust model from focusing on an M of N validator set. So for example, with Wormhole, there are 19 guardians, and you need 13 of them to attest to the message before it can be processed. With Axelar, I think it's theoretically 67 of 100, still a 2/3 assumption, but with 35 validators running, I think that's about 22 or 23 that need to approve before a message can be sent. With Nomad, this shifts instead to a 1 of N honest watcher assumption. So there's only one party called an updater that annotates the state root and sends it over from the home to destination chain. And once that latency window kicks in, for that 30-minute period, as long as there's one honest actor off chain, then that fraud proof can be submitted on chain and prevent a bad message from being sent across. We think this is really important because any system that requires multiple people to be always behaving correctly can be corrupted at some point. And so we want to reduce the assumptions around security to the bare minimum, which we think 1 of N is as good as it gets here. The second thing I want to focus on is scalability. Both POA and POS-based systems require every node in the network to be running a light client or to be kind of monitoring what's going on both chains. In the context of Nomad, it's simply one updater that annotates the state root. And then in the happy path, nobody else needs to do a ton of work. The watchers need to maintain liveness, but they can just basically monitor the home and replica contracts in Nomad and make sure that the state roots are valid. The other challenge with proof of stake based systems is what some folks in the comments have called out already, which is that this basically institutionalizes bribery. So if you can go buy all the tokens in the system, you can then corrupt the validator set and do whatever the hell you want. And that is not really like a good way to scale a system. And then the other bit here is that with validator-based systems that have an exogenous asset, the value staked and the value of that asset, so the market cap of whatever the native asset of the validator bridge is, needs to be greater than the amount escrowed. And so the bet you're making there is that the amount being sent over the bridge is always going to be less than what that intermediary network is worth, which I think is not it may work now when these systems are small, but if we really believe in kind of where crypto is going and this stuff becomes world scale, then this assumption really needs to be challenged. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is in terms of readiness. This is more of kind of a soft thing, but the reason I bring this up is today is an exciting day for us, and I may have bags under my eyes because Evmos is launching today, and we are the primary bridge alongside Connext supporting Evmos. The reason this is important is because we believe that Evmos, Osmosis, Terra, Stargaze, these chains are going to be the titans of the Cosmos ecosystem. And if Evmos has a ton of assets flooding into it in order to kind of participate in the various apps, the lending protocols, the AMMs that are being built there, then the fungibility of those assets with what's happening with the assets on Osmosis is critically important. Otherwise, what happens with IBC is that the fragmentation problem that would happen on one chain multiplies across all of them. And so it's quite important that as the Cosmos community, we are really intentional about how the bridges that we choose on each chain and making sure that the interfaces with EVM and Ethereum world are consistent. The other bit here is we're already live. We're deployed on Moonbeam and Milkameda as well. And it's very easy for us to deploy on more EVM chains because of the aforementioned lightweight properties of Nomad. We also have a really deep partnership with Connext. I think Arjun from Connext is also here. So if you have any questions there, please feel free to bring him up so he can join in. Connext is a really critical partner to Nomad because of the key trade-off that I made earlier, which is that we intentionally trade off latency in order to increase security and keep costs low. But one of the really cool things about this is Connext acts as the front end to Nomad's backend settlement layer, where Connext runs a decentralized liquidity network that allows users to get instantaneous swaps provided that the assets have been moved across already. And so the key trade-off we make here is we sacrifice a little bit of capital efficiency, but now we solve the latency problem. So I'm rocking the Celestia's shirt for a reason, because we're blatantly taking a page from Celestia's book, which is that modularity is key in building systems that are secure, robust, and hit all of the trade-off space. No one part of the stack can ever achieve everything perfectly. So we need to find complements and build a full stack solution that does that together. And so the key thing we've kind of highlighted here is Nomad and Connext create a modular interoperability stack where Nomad is the secure, extensible, and a little bit slower settlement layer, and Connext is that fast and secure and decentralized liquidity layer on top. And so I'll wrap up by saying that I honestly believe that everybody here is trying to build the best solution and really is going to do well in the Cosmoverse. Sergey and the Axelar team are renowned engineers. Justin, Deborah, and the UMI folks are like core Cosmos contributors and have been around and been part of the community. And Kanav, Spaceman, and the Wormhole team have one of the best market makers backing them. And Certus, of course, is also a really strong team. So we have a lot of good people trying to do the right thing. But because this is such an important decision for Cosmos, it is really key to evaluate the thing that matters most, which is what is the security model you're opting into. And as far as I can tell, all the validator-based systems, they can be architected well, but they choose a trade-off space that I think is not ideal with regards to security. And so that's my pitch for Nomad. I'll stop there.
Pranay, thank you so much. Sunny,
Hey, Arjun.
questions for our Nomad friends? I feel like they're like the most different of all the bridges, right? Based on my small pleb mind. Just for those in the audience, just so you know, I don't know shit about fuck. But that's why Sunny's here. So
Hey, Arjun. So yeah, okay. So when it comes to the security model, I think I've been like trying to wrap my head around the Nomad security model for a while, and I think I was on a call with Panay and James Pressrich and stuff like last week for like 2 hours, just trying to like fully wrap my head around the security model. And I think so. This is more for the audience, but like I think the conclusion that I've come to is the traditional validator set protocol, like bridge system security models, are more similar to BFT consensus, while Nomad is more similar to Nakamoto consensus style protocols, where one is liveness. I think Nomad is a very liveness favoring protocol, while multi-sig based ones are very safety favoring. And the trade-offs are also very similar, where I think in Nomad, so what we're trading off is latency versus overhead. So in a traditional in a validator BFT system, what we do is when there's a transfer, we have a big quorum set that all has to witness a transaction happening and all put their signature on it and send that signature. And then you either send all the signatures to the destination chain, which verifies all of them, which can come at very high gas costs potentially, or you can do fancy stuff like threshold cryptography, which is like what Axelar aims to do, where like you make it so the on-chain computation verification cost is lower, but you have higher off-chain overhead to do that aggregate signatures. So Nomad says, hey, that all that everyone verifying and witnessing a transaction is way too high overhead. Let's instead do something where one person is the only one who has to submit a thing, but then we have a set of watchers who are watching, and they can submit they could say, hey, this is invalid. And this makes it the overhead much lower because you only have to have one signature that you have to verify on the destination chain, but it comes at the con of much higher latency because you need these challenge periods. One of the big trade-offs here with Nomad, in my opinion, is it makes it very easy for you guys get higher safety because you're saying you only need one of n to be able to like block unsafe messages, but that also comes with the trade-off that you only need one of n to break liveness of the protocol as well, right? Where either it could be the updater themselves who stops submitting messages, or any one watcher can keep like blocking the chain. Why do you think that's an acceptable trade-off? Because in Tendermint, we traditionally make the trade-off where we say, hey, the reason we choose 2/3 bounds are because that's we have the same safety and liveness trade-off, where so why is it okay? Why do you think it's okay? Why do you make this do you think that there's like low liveness faults is like an okay trade-off?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that, and then maybe I'll pass it to Arjun because we have chatted a while, Sunny, and I think Arjun may have a different way of explaining it or a different perspective as well. I think there's two things to consider here, which is that the latency window itself is not significantly higher than the other systems that have come up here. So somebody in the chat mentioned that Axelar's time to finality is 15 to 20 minutes. For Nomad, it'll be about 45 minutes, right? So there'll be the latency for the probabilistic finality on Ethereum, the intervals that the relayers run and the updaters and relayers run, and then the actual dispute window, which will be 30 minutes for Ethereum. So that's not an order of magnitude higher. It is a little bit higher, but when it comes to a little bit more speed versus like safety, that safety feels like a worthwhile trade-off. It's kind of a Pareto principle gain over on that front. The other thing is the 30 minutes is primarily for Ethereum, just because we don't want to have something like a MakerDAO Black Thursday event where you can't submit your fraud proof on chain because the block space market is so ridiculous. But for the faster chains, that latency window could be a lot smaller. So if ever we want to bring like AVAX from Avalanche over to Osmosis, that could be a much smaller, or the parameterization of that window could take into account Avalanche's much greater block space. Obviously, we don't have the numbers there yet, but that is one thing to consider.
What happens during like weird downtimes? So let's say you sent the message, a fraud message, and then the like destination chain died for like a little bit, and like let's say right around upgrade time or something like that, right? And you know, during the last upgrade, Osmosis was down for about 45 minutes. How do you make sure that there's enough time to get is it time based? Is it block based? How do we make sure that there's not weird games that can be done on like playing with the challenge periods?
Yeah, I think if you're getting into situations where the recipient chain is going down and having liveness issues, you probably have bigger problems. That said, like if the chain is...
I mean, Cosmos SDK upgrade often will take a chain down for about like an hour or two because
Sure.
do like database migrations.
If it is like a planned upgrade or planned downtime, then you can also have the relayer stop, right? So the relayer won't post invalid state routes if the chain is expected to be down, right? In the case of fraud...
My question is that like a time where like the relayer could target an attack right around when an upgrade is planned?
So the attack vector here is an updater knows that planned downtime is going to happen. They commit a fraudulent state route, and then the relayer, they collude with the relayer somehow or run a relayer themselves to post that over to the destination chain. I haven't thought through this edge case. If that chain goes down, then when it comes back, presumably that dispute window, that delta would kick off whenever that chain comes back. So it wouldn't, like, the dispute window wouldn't expire while there is planned downtime, right? Because that's when you
the
have
dispute window starts when data is posted. So if there is no data able to be posted to the receiving chain, the dispute window would not have started yet. So you're not achieving synchrony of the window across chains. The window itself is enforced only on one chain. So you're guaranteed that there will always be synchrony there.
Yeah, but you can make sure you can make sure to post the data right before the downtime hits, and then the dispute window has started.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all. So I think it's important to say that like no cross-chain protocol is ever going to be like invulnerable to like you always adopt like the properties of the underlying chain, and if there are problems with the underlying chain, you will be subject to them. I think this would be the same sort of issue in in a validator set-based system as well, where you could potentially use the chain's environment to affect the way that validators execute a transaction. I think in this case, it's probably okay to say that. So it is the case that while the time window within which the cooldown occurs is on the destination chain, the dispute itself is happening, is like fraud itself is proved on the origin. So even if you ended up in a situation where you had a malicious updater post a proof or post data to an Osmosis chain that happened to go down for an hour immediately afterwards, the fraud itself is proved on Ethereum on the origin anyway, so it wouldn't make a difference.
But you need to be able to block the execution from happening on the destination chain.
That is part of how like the basically disconnecting a Nomad application happens from watchers in the first place.
Yeah, the other bit is Luke just mentioned in the chat. Luke is one of the engineers on the Nomad team, that the dispute window is calculated based on blocks on the receiving chain. So if the blocks aren't produced, then that fraud window is stopped as well. So that liveness, once liveness resumes, that window will also resume. So I think this is relevant too, because this is not only a problem that I think will affect Nomad, because this latency not only prevents fraud happening at the trust root, but also things like what happened with Wormhole a couple weeks back, where if there is an application level exploit, you can use this latency window to prevent any bad messages from being processed. So when you're dealing with high value packets, there is a likelihood that these externally verified systems and validator-based chains are also going to start adding latency windows. So anywhere where you have to have a window that you prevent fraud or protect the kind of value flowing through, you have to account for some of these liveness properties on the destination chain.
I think a good way to think about it is sort of like a circuit breaker in traditional finance. So like, there is a need to build mechanisms that are release valves for cases where you have a very large amount of volume going across chains very suddenly. And those types of activities, we need to be particularly careful that they're not happening as a result of a massive depegging of some representative asset. And so you know, optimistic systems like Nomad are particularly well suited to solve this problem because you can have, you know, the combination of Nomad plus Connext. So actually, I'm realizing we never really did too much of an intro into Connext. I know that there's like been a few questions in the chat, so maybe I should do that really quickly. So Connext is we've been in the space for quite a while. We actually we're researchers, L2 researchers on Ethereum for like several years. We built one of the first L2s on Ethereum using state channels, and then became really interested in interop as a result of the like fragmentation that happened within the Ethereum ecosystem. And we've also just generally been very big fans of Cosmos. And in fact, our kind of new system will be using a Cosmos SDK for like basically a Tendermint chain for like transaction ordering under the hood. The way that Connext works is we're a liquidity layer that sits on top of Nomad. You can think of this as like two pieces of the same puzzle, where Nomad is used as a mechanism to send some arbitrary message across chains, and it really can be completely arbitrary. And then Connext is used to short circuit that message in the event that the recipient, the target of that message, doesn't specifically need permissioning. So the idea here is like, if, for instance, it's a user making a transfer, the user doesn't really care if their transfer is received from, you know, the bridge or if it's received from some third-party liquidity provider. And Connext basically does that. It effectively allows you to short circuit the Nomad window where, you know, fine, it might take 30 to 45 minutes for a transaction to go through Nomad, but then with Connext running on top of Nomad, and these things will have the same on-chain interface, will be the exact same kind of like protocol stack. For a user, it will just take less than 2 minutes, basically the amount of time to finality on the origin chain. The interesting consequence of this is that for the circuit breaker piece is that like you can still guarantee to users, and you cannot do this with other systems, but with Connext plus Nomad, you can guarantee to users that they will, in the user-facing case, they will get their transactions within a certain period of time, and that period of time can be like a couple of minutes. However, if you end up in a situation like the Wormhole attack where something goes wrong at the protocol, or if even the chain itself is 51% attacked, the Nomad itself can basically execute like a circuit breaker to stop additional value from being pushed over the bridge. And at that point, what happens is the Connext liquidity providers are the ones who are fronting capital. So the total loss of capital is basically equal to the max amount of liquidity that can be distributed within that 30-minute period. It sets like an overage on like a max cap on the amount of loss on for like these black swan events.
Cool. Okay, so you know, I think we can go all day on the security model discussion. Let's talk about some, like, you know, maybe some other stuff with Nomad. So I guess one question is, let's say Nomad, unlike a lot of these other ones, doesn't have a chain per se of its own, right? So if I want to now send ETH from Osmosis to Avalanche, would that have to make transactions on main chain Ethereum, and how expensive would that be?
That would go through Connext, and it would not need to make transactions on main chain Ethereum.
Right. But if I want, let's say Connext wasn't in here and it was just using the bridging itself, I'm trying to send $1 million.
Yep. So if you're going to use the Nomad kind of settlement layer and not go through the Connext liquidity layer, right now we only have Solidity contracts while we work on Cosmosm contracts. So for example, we're deployed on Ethereum and Evmos, but we could very well deploy Solidity contracts on the Avalanche side, and when Cosmosm is ready, deploy Wasm contracts on Osmosis. So direct transit would be possible, but until the WASM contracts are deployed, it would need to be an IBC message to Evmos and then using Nomad channels from Evmos to Avalanche. So it's more of a transition plan, but nothing stops us from going directly between chains, provided that the underlying VM or there's like an expressive enough contracting language to basically have hashes in a Merkle tree.
Or to Osmosis, by the way. Like it doesn't technically matter where the transaction is routed through. You basically just need some place that allows you to both run IBC and then also Nomad. Yeah.
What would be like the timeline for single hop from Ethereum to Osmosis? Like, so I guess one, Cosmosm is actually available on Osmosis now after the upgrade yesterday or 2 days ago. But so what would be the timeline on like getting single, like what would be the UX of getting things until that's ready to go through Evmos? What would be that like UX?
So just to clarify, like the user experience of all of this is more on the Connect side, because like as a user, you're interacting with the clearance layer, never the settlement layer, right? We're basically like outsourcing all of that to like the liquidity providers and institutional people that are using like Nomad on a slower basis and also netting off against one another to drive down costs. So the user experience of doing this, you can actually try right now. So Connect has been live for like a year. We've done like 1.2 billion volume and support 11 chains. You can actually use this right now, and the user experience is basically going to be the same as what exists currently, where you just send a transaction from any chain and it will just end up at Osmosis instantly for the user. And the goal is, to work towards a model where not only are you doing that, but you can also then basically bounce through Osmosis to get the correct liquidity to go to any other IBC chain. So for instance, like send a transaction from Polygon or FTM or even something more exotic, send a transaction from like Polygon directly to go to some Cosmos chain XYZ that on route swaps between Polygon flavored assets to Osmosis flavored assets, and part of the same transaction executes a contract call on the Cosmos chain XYZ.
So one question, I guess, for you, Arjun, so I know that like, Connext and Nomad have this like, partnership that you guys have. Would Connext be willing to support other bridges though? Or is this like a package deal?
We're a team that cares a lot about trust minimization. And our model of trust minimization, from what we've seen, like we're L2 developers, and that's why we like the Nomad model, is because it's fundamentally the trust model is more similar to something like an optimistic rollup than something like a sidechain and a two-way sidechain bridge. Our thesis is that those kinds of validator set-based bridges, multi-sig-based bridges, create systemic risks that ultimately weaken our position in the long term. And we're a team that's really interested in building something that still exists in 50 years or 100 years, rather than something that just wins the market in the next year or two. We like Nomad because we're actually kind of exclusively married to Nomad because it is the only thing that actually does that. There is no other general communication mechanism across chains that has acceptable security trade-offs from our perspective.
That didn't really answer the question, though.
Are we going to be working with other like mechanisms like this? Only if there are other mechanisms for like a certain cluster or like a certain sovereignty zone that are better. So, for instance, like you can layer Connext on top of like IBC. Our thesis is like use Connext. Basically, Connext is the interface for developers and users. It uses Nomad under the hood as like the primary option for going to across clusters, and then whenever available, if there is some trust minimized intra-cluster communication like IBC, use that instead. And so, from a developer perspective, you're just routed over IBC.
Connext shouldn't even care about the bridge, though, right? That should be up for the market makers to decide how to do. Shouldn't Connext just provide like the I as a market maker, even if let's say if I want on Connext want to like provide between Nomad, let's say Nomad, let's say Evmos is using Nomad ETH, and let's say Osmosis ends up using bridge chain ETH. a Nomad, is like liquidity, like creating new liquidity paths on Connext permissionless. Can I, as a market maker, just suddenly show up and say, hey, I'm going to provide a swap between Nomad ETH on Evmos for bridge chain ETH on Osmosis?
There is a whitelist for assets right now, but that is mostly just like auditor recommendation rather than anything else. The goal is to head towards like totally permissionless liquidity provision. That said, we do think that there's like we think that like in general people form opinions about this stuff. And like the bottom line is because of how Connext works, like we do need some sort of transport layer underneath that actually passes the message around. So it would be really inefficient for liquidity providers to like use Nomad to pass a message around about this thing and then have to figure out a way to swap into the correct liquidity as part of completing a transaction. That would increase their costs. It would reduce margins quite a bit.
Got it. And then, okay, cool. And then I guess one last question. This might be a little bit sensitive, but I think it's important. What was the deal with happened with like the optics bridge, and like, is that, you know, how should our community like think about that?
Totally. Yeah. So for more context, optics is stands for optimistic interchain communications, and was basically the design that one of my co-founders, James Prestwich, came up with, and is an interoperability protocol that we were working on prior. Nomad is a completely separate project, and so a lot of the kind of concerns around optics or anything has no bearing onto Nomad. You should evaluate Nomad as its security model and the operational systems in a completely separate silo. And we're more than happy to answer any questions. We've kind of put up the governance posture on the documentation. And so it's completely separate. And while there is a shared lineage of the protocols, because they're both built on the same open source design, the instantiation and the team working around Nomad are building a separate project altogether.
Okay. What was the deal with the attack on the optics bridge? There was like basic, there was. Yeah, can you explain what was the attack that happened on the optics bridge? And
yeah, so I don't think it was an attack. I think for context for folks watching, Sunny is referring to kind of a thread around optics where there was a recovery manager issue. I'm not at liberty, or I don't think we have the time to go into detail here, but it comes down to the fact that right now, per Justin's point from Gravity, that a lot of the systems that are kind of vying for the Osmosis primary bridge are running smart contracts that have upgradability baked in. And upgradability requires there be like admin permissions or keys that all the key holders in the multisig can kind of vote together to make governance changes or upgrade the system. I think the concern there was around the multisig involved in that operational aspect. But one thing we've done is for the Nomad deployments, all the multisigs, the governor, the recovery managers, everything is posted in the docs. And I know some of the community members in Discord and in the chat here have mentioned that, okay, it's a 2 of 4 multisig for the governor right now, and that is concerning because functionally it only takes 2 parties to kind of co-opt the system. And part of what we're trying to do here is be really transparent and make no bones about the fact that all of these are really nascent systems. Everybody's like, this stuff is hard, like Sergey mentioned, and everybody is building fairly recently. And part of our goal is to kind of democratize that over time. And one of the things we'd like to do is, if the community wants Nomad to be the primary bridge provider for Osmosis, we would love to get some of the members from the Cosmoverse into the multisig, so there can be a lot more kind of guarantees around who can control it, and then over time phase out the multisig altogether.
Cool. Thanks.
Nice. It's me.
Wait, can I ask one? Can I ask one more question really quick?
One more.
One last one. How would the security difference? I just thought of it just now. How are the security? Let's say we had a Nomad system with 20 validators, and we had a multi-sig system with 20 validators. How would the security be that different if we made the signing threshold, instead of being 67%, we made it 95%? So now you have the same, okay, you just need. Isn't the security system the same now? The thing with the multi-sig system is you can actually have the trade-off. You can choose where you want the trade-off between safety and liveness. While in the optimistic system, you don't have that ability to choose. You have to go with one point on that trade-off space.
Yeah.
So I think. Sorry.
Go ahead, Arjun.
I was gonna say one thing that I think like is not specified here is that. So I think it's important to think about these things crypto-economically, which basically means like if you had an attacker with an unlimited amount of funds, how much would it cost them, and how difficult would it be for them to attack a system? You know, because they would be able to with unlimited funds, they would be able to do that, but how much would it actually cost for that to happen? Traditionally, with like the underlying blockchains, the thesis is that the crypto-economic security is derived from the basically the amount of like economic security associated with the validator sets. How much are the validators actually staking, and what would it cost to corrupt that? The problem with having validator set bridges is that in addition to the underlying validator set assumptions that you make about the origin and destination chains, you also now make an assumption about the strength of the validators, the third-party validator set introduced by the bridge. And in many cases that we've seen, that validator set is weaker than the underlying chains themselves. And even if it isn't, it is still an additional security assumption. With Nomad, the economics are different, because in the Nomad case, you're not saying there is no amount of money that you could pay to be 100% certain that there isn't some watchtower somewhere in the world running anonymously watching the system. What you're doing now is making.
I thought on Nomad watchers have to be whitelisted, otherwise there's a DOS vulnerability.
At the moment, yes, but I think the goal is to head towards using economic mechanisms so that there isn't a DOS vulnerability anymore, and it is a permissionless system, and that's the whole point.
This is.
But now you have an economic amount that you can pay in order to brick the system and like break liveness.
No, because all you have to do, like, you can brick the system, but the cost of that, so you can always brick any blockchain, right? Like you can pay a cost to brick a blockchain for a certain fixed amount of time. That's always going to be the case. The goal is to make sure that the cost of bricking the blockchain for that fixed amount of time is greater than any benefit that you get within that time. And if you structure the economic incentives here correctly, it is true that, you know, any watchtower could instigate a dispute and DOS the system, but if their economic loss is really high to do that, there's no really benefit to doing it, then it seems very economically irrational to do it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, we can imagine. My point is, we can imagine situations where like breaking liveness can have massive economic benefits, right? Like imagine there's liquidations happening on one chain, and you need to get your tokens back to the other chain to like not get liquidated. So my point is that.
But this is already true on the underlying chains, so you're not introducing a new assumption. Yeah. As long as the cost of bricking the system is equal to or greater than the cost of bricking the underlying chain, then it's basically exactly the same assumption.
Yeah. I guess all I'm trying to say is that like a multi-sig system in which you have 100% like signature requirements is actually not that different than the Nomad security requirements.
It depends who the validators are, and it depends how many signatories there are, right? So it's like you could have 100 signatures, but then all of those 100 nodes are run by the same person, or you could have 100 signatures, and that equates to $100 million in effective economic security. But that $100 million. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say like that you know that means it costs $100 million to attack the system, but if you have a permissionless watcher set, even if you have $100 million and you try to attack the system, you can never be sure that you're going to get away with it, right? Like the question is basically to make it so that from the economic perspective of an attacker, can you make sure that the risk of the attack is offset by the gains that you are certain to get, or at least reasonably likely to get? And in Nomad, you can never be certain of that, and that's the whole point.
Who runs the watchers on the Evmos instantiation right now?
Right now, the Nomad core team is running the watchers, but the plan is we're working on Dockerizing it and shipping it so that like anybody can run the watcher, and we can whitelist them and align incentives. So, for example, if we're running the token bridge on Osmosis, Osmosis team, if you guys want to run the watcher, you can. Otherwise, you can delegate to another party to spare you the overhead.
Cool. Okay, cool. Thanks.
It's sort of the same, like, it's very, very similar to like an optimistic rollup, right? Like if you have Sevmos or something like that, and, you know, as long as like, it's true that over the long run, what you want is to make it open so that any number of people can like dispute if something goes wrong. But that's a much easier direction to go, and a much more scalable direction to go than to say like, okay, we just need to like continue scaling the economic security underlying this itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dave asked a question in the comments, but let's save it for later because I think we've gone pretty long here.
I think we need to move on to our next bridge. So many bridges, so little time. So little time. All right, next up from our bridge friends. First off, Nomad, thank you so much for popping on the live stream. Next up, we have our friends from Wormhole. Wormhole, pop on up here. Take the stage.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hello.
How's it going? So, yeah, I'll just do quick intros. I'm Conor Correa. I'm the president of Jump Crypto, which is the crypto division of Jump Trading Group. We're one of the major co-contributors to the Wormhole project. Wormhole is a generic message layer across a number of heterogeneous blockchain environments. It's connected to 8 blockchains today and has iteratively been expanding. It's reached a number of other blockchains with aims to get to 15 to 16 towards the end of the year. The Portal token bridge is one of many applications built atop this generic message layer, and today has close to $3 billion of total value locked in contracts on the bridge. It supports hundreds of millions of dollars of value flowing through it every week or almost every day now, and it's the default bridge for the Solana ecosystem. As Sunny pointed out, it's the official representation of tokens within the Solana token list. It's also the default bridge for UST as it grows across chains from Terra. And so UST on every Wormhole connected chain is not WUST, it's just UST for the very same UX reasons. And Wormhole has become a strong choice for that ecosystem as a result of the assets being completely path independent. And so UST flowing from Terra to Ethereum to Solana, or directly from Terra to Solana, retain the same mint addresses, which creates much stronger UX for all the parties involved, and has that's led to about $800 or $900 million of UST now being in the bridge. FTX, the exchange, natively supports cross-chain deposits and withdrawals through their exchange as a default option through Wormhole, along with a large number of other exchanges and front ends and wallets. It's about 12 months in, has a significant amount of traction. And in addition to the Portal token bridge, there's also an NFT bridge that's live. OpenSea actually now correctly classifies collections coming from Solana to Ethereum through the Wormhole bridge so that they're able to be listed and displayed there. The Cosmos implementation of the NFT bridge is in audit right now to support Terra NFTs. And, as Sunny pointed out, Cosmos is now supported on Osmosis, and so should cleanly translate once we're able to get online there. It is, it's currently a multi-sig bridge. It's been covered multiple times through this session, and so I won't go into it. There's 19 Guardians. The 19 Guardians basically operate most proof-of-stake networks, including Osmosis, Cosmos, and others. But the important thing to, I think, keep in mind here is that Wormhole isn't married to any trust model. It's built in a completely abstractable and modular fashion. And so the 2 of 3 consensus is only the pragmatic solution that was available and seemed the most pragmatic and secure at that point in time when the Certus team was initially building Wormhole. And as fancier technologies and better trust assumptions become available and are audited, secure, and trusted by the ecosystem, that the backend for verification is easily swappable. That's kind of like the very high level. Before we dive into a lot of questions, and I know everyone's been watching this session for a bit, so I'll save a big spiel and we can go into questions very quickly. But I did want to address a few of the points that Sunny brought up earlier. The deposit address feature is already supported in Wormhole as well. The Portal Bridge website, which is one of many front ends that supports the Wormhole bridge on the back end, requires people to connect 2 wallets so that funds are safe and people don't make silly mistakes. But when you're withdrawing through exchanges such as 01 or MXC or FTX, or other front ends even, they allow you to directly deposit to a deposit address as it stands today, which should be a comparable experience to kind of anything else. The protocol also doesn't marry itself to any delivery guarantees or any method of delivery guarantees. But there is a relayer network that's been built that's permissionless and should allow people to basically transmit all kinds of Wormhole messages, including token bridge transfers, over to Osmosis and other chains without needing to hold the native gas token in the destination chain to make the UX simpler. Really the hope is that the $3+ billion in TVL that's locked in the bridge today, becomes liquidity that's available to the Osmosis ecosystem off the bat. With this bridge already integrated and heavily used in the Terra ecosystem, through the, and with Osmosis now supporting Cosmos and contracts, it should be, another straightforward integration that should, quickly get Osmosis live very quickly. The NFT bridge, I just had some other stats down as well, has over 1,500 NFTs now. There's a lot more applications, including cross-chain swaps and governance and a bunch of other things that are being built by other teams on top of Wormhole right now. So Hendrik just hopped on as well. He used to be the CEO of Certus One. Big brains behind all of this stuff, and so I'll let him jump in on anything that I missed here.
Yeah, I feel we didn't miss anything important. I'll give it to Sunny to ask really hot questions. I bet we'll cover everything.
Cool. Thanks, Hendrik. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again as well.
Cool. So so we can talk a little bit about some Wormhole stuff. So I guess to start off with, Wormhole is this sort of POA system instead of using proof of stake, and it's a little bit I would say a little bit untransparent. How does the governance processes of Wormhole work? How does one even join the Wormhole validator set? How do we how do you imagine these governance processes will evolve going forward?
Are you going to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think right now, as you pointed out, it's a POA set of 19 guardians, some of which are the largest firms in the infrastructure space, anyways, making up a large share of the stake there. And truth is, I think when we look at it from a practical perspective, starting off, a lot of these systems, a lot of the bridges that get developed, a lot of the protocols come with a lot of assumptions on economic security, a lot of complex models that actually give you the game theoretical safety. So when we initially started building the system, A, time to market was extremely important. And B, we wanted to build a system that can grow to a large number of, a very large TVL number and still give us security. So essentially what POA for us translates to is proof of reputation and proof of law, because all of these parties, as much as I think in the utopian view and the long-term view on our side, this is unwanted, everyone's KYC'd. These are large, reputable companies with billion-dollar market caps themselves that are putting their reputation at stake to participate as a guardian. And going forward, these guardians, the 2/3 plus majority of them, controls governance and can enact votes that could transfer governance to a DAO-based model, which I personally think is the right way going forward. POS is the right way going forward, at least in the midterm, because as Kanav pointed out, our trust assumptions and backend, they're pluggable. When we initially designed it, Leopold, who was CTO of Certus One, and we sat down for a couple of weeks and read all the papers, looked at GG20, the amazing threshold cryptography work that was going on. At the time, I think Frost just came out on Schnorr threshold signatures, BLS threshold, and DKG. These protocols, all of them were very novel. A lot of them hadn't seen a lot of peer review. There were no stable implementations. So there was a lot of both execution risk and technological risk. At the same time, we saw that zero knowledge proof technology was getting more and more adoption throughout the space, both on the verification side and on the actual live client proof side. So we wanted to design a system that could adopt all of these mechanisms, could change to these mechanisms later. And POA seemed like the most secure and fast solution in the beginning. And going forward, I think we have a team sitting here of researchers that are both looking into cutting edge cryptography and particularly zero knowledge proofs to get us to more and more trust, like ideally fully trustless on the chains where we can support it, where we can have fully ZKP backed proofs for finality. And I think this is really where we want to go. So yeah, I think throughout getting there, like truth is zero knowledge proof verification on a chain like Solana would probably take us to do like 300 transactions to get the compute budget. We would see similar things on chains like Algorand and so on, but we want to be able to cover them all, because this is what you want. You want to be able to get liquidity out of all of these networks and want to enable your users to get there. So we need to wait for these technologies to be actually adoptable and be viable in verification. Same goes for BLS. We still don't have support for precompiles on Ethereum's EVM for the safe curves. All of that is just not there yet. But what's really important for us is know all of the technological development that is going on and be prepared to implement them as soon as they become viable in the whole system. And I'm very sure full trustlessness will be possible, because there's just no way around like building precompiles and acceleration for proof verification. Like validity proofs, that's where we eventually want to go to.
Cool, makes sense. To what extent do you think? So one of the nice things about, I would say like, Gravity and Axelar, is that they're very like Cosmos native. To what extent do you think like the Wormhole architecture seems very Solana first? Like, one place where I know it popped up for me was where the amount field in transfer functions are in 64s, because that's what Solana supports. But that means every other chain has to do this like complex dust accounting. I guess like there's more like a broader question of like, how do you guys, it seems right now Wormhole feels very much like this is the Solana bridge. How do you guys like plan on making sure like other ecosystems and stuff also have say into like the architecture, and that kind of relates to the governance processes as well?
Yeah, I think the point you mentioned, that's a very obvious case of like using a U64 as data type for the amount. Actually, the payload itself in the transfer, once again, going to like making the protocol as flexible as possible, is U256. We limited to U64 because we wanted to use the lowest common denominator. In the CosmWasm world, we have U128 in the Terra world. So when we looked at all of this, we're like, okay, we can go to 256, then we need to make exceptions here and there. We can do a U128, then we have one less exception in one network. In the end, we settled for the lowest common denominator. This is not fixed. Through an upgrade we can adopt and get rid of the dust settling. I think as much as you pointed out, there is complexity. I think we try to keep it as little as possible. We just refund the dust. There's no complex accounting happening in most places. The most complex piece is us doing overflow protection, so no one exceeds the U64s. I think beyond that, there's few or pretty much no place that I would be able to come up with now that is Solana specific. I think more we want to be able to address and easily and fast address virtual machines and virtual machine based chains that use data types that are not what I think some people would consider wasteful 256 bits that we have in the EVM world. I think otherwise, when we look at these, as like with the 256 bits in the actual payload, we try to design for a cross-chain world. We don't design for Solana. We are connected to 7 chains right now. Kind of correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and eight as of this morning. Yep.
8 as of this morning, even better. And we want to go to 17 more. We want to be everywhere to be able to enable liquidity and data to flow. And therefore we can't think of Solana, but we need to think of the lowest common denominator when thinking about the actual practical implementation. Sunny, you're on mute.
Yeah. Sunny, I think we got you on mute.
All right, so the question that popped at the bottom, I was going to get to that later, but it's up. Are funds SAFU in the future? And also, where did the money for the refund come this time, and can we expect that to happen again?
I'll take that one. So the money for the refund came from Jump's balance sheet. So for folks that aren't familiar with Jump's historically been a very big prop trading firm. We've been in crypto for over 6 years now, and we've been building, trading, doing a number of different things. We've got 140 people in crypto full time. We've been fortunate to be in the space for a very long period of time, and mostly we've been doing it very quietly. We've been more public as of the last couple of years, given our more community-focused involvement with projects like Wormhole and many others. I'll say $320 million was a punch in the gut. It's never easy to make that decision, but we have pretty damn strong conviction that bridges and connectivity infrastructure like Wormhole is going to be very, very critical as ecosystems evolve and as the space goes forward. And it was a decision that we had to make to let both Wormhole and all the ecosystems that it's connected to give an opportunity to mature as time progresses, right? I'm not gonna make any promises on what happens the next, if there's ever a next time. We think this is that the code is really good, that it's really secure. We've put our money where our mouth is, on laying that bet down, on laying that conviction. There's a $10 million bug bounty, which I think is the single largest bug bounty in probably, software at large, for any critical bugs that are found in Wormhole. There's multiple audit firms on retainer that are auditing Wormhole. Of course, Hendrik and Leo and co came from CTF backgrounds. And so, everything that you can possibly do, the protocol was designed with simplicity at heart. And the idea is for it to calcify out in the wild and really go through the test of time and be that kind of piece of infrastructure. So,
how big is Jump's balance sheet remaining?
We're doing okay.
Okay. Yeah. At least another 320 million, right? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess here's another question. Most of the other teams here are very crypto native, and not to say that you guys aren't. Hendrik, you guys started as a Cosmos validator, but I think it's fair for us to be a little bit skeptical when it comes to the motives of TradFi folks trying to come into crypto and subvert. Everything has been subverted, as Jay would say. What is Jump's motives here? One interesting thing to note is that I know in the RFP, you guys are very clear that you have no plans on charging fees on Wormhole. And so if that's the case, or at least currently in the near future. So what's the business model here? And especially, taking into account that Jump's primary business model is to be a prop trader firm. Does that mean, I mean, also say is there some MEV play, cross-chain MEV play being done here? What's the goal? Why does Jump want to build the cross-chain bridge system?
Totally fair question. So Jump Trading's primary business is definitely trading. We're one of the largest quantitative trading firms globally. Jump's crypto's initial business, which started as an intern project at the University of Illinois, was also primarily trading across centralized venues, primarily in crypto, and applying the same alpha models and trading on our own book. Over the last couple of years, of the 140 people that I mentioned, I'd say over a half are now focused on venture building and research. So there's a few projects that we've really tried to throw a lot of resources at and muscle and time and attention into. Wormhole, of course, being one of the biggest ones there. And we've been investing in crypto since ETH was under $1 at Jump. We're very, very long the space as a whole, and the realization that I think we came to a few years ago was that as this market scales, there's going to be a lot of inefficiencies that present good trading opportunities, but the quantum of that is going to be much smaller than the value that gets created, just period, and the value capture that you can then kind of participate in as the space grows. And so even with Protocol, which is another Oracle network that we're very involved in, we've tried to bring together our fiercest competitors in the TradFi world that we hate and never talk to and never pick up the phone to speak with. And that's because, there's an opportunity here to really create a positive sum game where only zero sum games existed. And so, that's why we brought Hendrik and the Certus guys in. We're still running their infrastructure. We're still validators on a number of networks, including Cosmos and Terra, Solana, and others. And the aim is, that as this space grows, that we're well positioned to, be a big part of it, to help push it forward, and to rebuild, not only finance, but a few other things, in a slightly more decentralized manner, right? And so our motivations with when you talk about MEV on Wormhole, I really hope someone's gonna build it on top of Wormhole. We can't build everything. We're trying to build a protocol and hope for an ecosystem to develop around it. We're just one of the many other contributors to Wormhole as it stands even right now. There's about 5 teams building cross-chain swaps on it right now, few of which that have raised venture funding. There's teams building real farming, governance, a bunch of other stuff. The portal token bridge doesn't charge any fees, like you pointed out. We haven't really committed to a monetization model yet. That's the real honest answer. There's a lot of interesting things to do with this kind of infrastructure. It even today exists in a completely decentralized fashion. Any upgrades to the bridge of any sort need to go through the 2/3 consensus from everyone that runs on the bridge right now. And so, I think there's going to be some interesting stuff to do with it going forward, but I don't think we've committed to a monetization model yet, I guess, if I had to be concise.
One thing when I was testing out, our team, we like the other day, we were like going through all the bridges and like actually just playing with the UX. One interesting thing about the Wormhole UX that was different, I noticed, was that we have to make a withdraw, like we have to make a claim transaction when we receive tokens. And this turned into a little bit of a challenge, especially if we didn't have the fee token on the receiving side. What's the reason for this as part of the UX, and is that a solvable problem?
Yeah,
Hendrik, take it away with relayers, man.
I can take it. At the core, that's what Kanav mentioned. Wormhole's more of a notary and an attestation network than it is a bridge with delivery guarantees. So the moment you send your transfer, the Wormhole network's going to attest it, but it's not going to send it to the other chain. Actually, the Wormhole message doesn't even have a receiver field at its very core. And what's currently, so you as the sender of that transfer, you take that basically as a check and cash it in on the other side where the message can be verified. So what the team's been working on for a while, and what we're very close to rolling out with, and like making public, is that permissionless Oracle, essentially Oracle or like relayer delivery network, where the transfer protocol already has a field for fees, where you can take part of the asset you're sending and make that available to whoever actually then cashes in that check on the other side. So this is pretty much open. Like anyone who picks up the message on the Wormhole peer-to-peer network or via Wormhole RPC can take that message, can put it there, and can earn the fee. So this is something we've been working on. And I think it's already up. Like a lot of the code is already in the repos. It's just a matter of like documentation and getting people to run it. And at that point, you will be able to make a transfer, specify the fee. The UI will hopefully have a way to make a good estimation for the fee, where you have some kind of delivery guarantee, and then it will be rolled out on the other side. But delivery is always permissionless, and it's gonna remain permissionless in that model.
Do I have, if I want to send ETH from Osmosis to Avalanche, does that require making transaction back on Ethereum, or no?
It doesn't. In Wormhole, everything's like direct connections between all networks. You never have to go through an intermediary hub.
Well, that would mean that you wouldn't. Doesn't that mean I do have to unwind back to Ethereum then?
If you want to go from Osmosis straight to Avalanche, you can go straight there.
If I want to send ETH from Osmosis.
Oh, yes. All the wrapped assets in the Wormhole ecosystem are fungible with each other. So no matter which path you take, whether you go Ethereum, Osmosis, Terra, Avalanche, or any other path, wrapped ETH in the Wormhole ecosystem is always fully fungible with each other, and never having to go through the unwind in between.
I've heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true, that you guys are also considering building a Cosmos chain. Is that
there is some truth to it? Yes. Yes, we are. Wormhole chain is going to be core for a lot of protocol native features. For example, a bunch of security and safety features. We had a bunch of folks before us talk about reducing the blast radius of an individual chain. And with almost 3 billion in TVL, as we have them in Wormhole right now, there's the risk of this exceeding the security budget of a new chain that's being connected. So if the Guardians decide to introduce a chain and connect it to the network and to the token bridge network in particular, that maybe only has a security budget of $1 billion, we will really want to make sure that this chain and the compromise of that chain puts no funds in the Wormhole ecosystem at risk. So this Wormhole chain, for example, is going to be the accounting hub to track the balances of all of the chains essentially, and prevent transfers of funds that are not actually backed out of any chain, and so on. And a lot of the protocol DAO-ish features, governance, are going to be homed in this particular zone. And what we're also quite excited about is Wormhole kind of being the UDP in the cross-chain messaging world. Could be an interesting way to tunnel IBC and replace the light clients into a lot of these other chains. This is something we're actively working on and hope to be rolling out fairly soon.
Right. Cool.
Red. Is it time to move to the group panel discussion? Do we have any more questions solo for our... I think Umi dipped out, to my knowledge. This is the info that I'm getting in my headset from my broadcaster friends. I think Umi has dipped out for right now out of this live stream. But I would love to open this up and bring everybody on stage that's still here, and all of these people that are out on the World Wide Web who have been here for 2 hours. You've almost been listening to a bridge convo for a whole Lord of the Rings film, all right? Pat yourselves on the back for still being here. Now I think we're going to start to, populate some of those questions up from YouTube and let our respective bridge admins at it. Sonny, quick question for you. What does SAFU mean? I know it's an acronym. I'm assuming it's safe as fuck, but I don't know what the U stands for, to save my life. Is it not that?
I actually don't know. I mean, the origin came from a CZ tweet years ago when Binance got hacked, and then CZ just tweeted, "Funds are SAFU," because Binance just refunded everyone. I don't actually know what SAFU means, but that's just the origin of the term.
It's safe as fuck, right? Safe as fuck something. Safe as
Sure,
fuck.
yeah.
Undeniably. It's undeniably safe as fuck. Safe as fuck. All right, I'm stopping. All right. Questions from the audience. YouTube. What do you guys got? SAFU is a misspelled safe. No, it might be. I don't know. I kind of like to think that it stands for safe as fuck. There's something to be said for battle tested in the event of an exploit. There's something to be said for battle tested in the event of an exploit on the bridge is found and exploited. What measures do you have in place to ensure funds are safe as fuck? Undeniably. Who is this for? Is this for everybody?
I think it's a good question for everybody.
We need a 30-second elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Answer though from everybody. Should we go back in alphabetical order? Axelar, Sergey.
Hey,
are our funds
sure, yeah.
SAFU?
Awesome. Yeah, I think on the high level, I think it's a combination of design and engineering and processes, right? So I think on the design, I think we're have a decentralized network and an open validator set. I think on engineering, I think if you look at how much resources we spent towards the audits, we've done close to 12 audits by now across different stack levels, smart contracts, and so on and so forth. Our team, I think, has very deep roots in actually building very complicated systems and cryptographic system, and actually designing some of the things many other people are using, including BLS and so on and so forth. And and it's a question of processes, right? So it's having operational type of processes in place to react to things. Our validators are very well trained. We have processes in place across the team to react to situations, and we have features on the smart contracts that we're building on top of it, right? That will make this as safe as possible. So no security, and I've been doing security for life, is a function of a single assumption. It's a full stack approach, and we have the full stack.
Is there an insurance fund? I think that's kind of also what Seifu means.
Yeah, so Axelar token itself will be live at some point soon, and we're actually allocating at least 5% of the token towards insurance fund and insurance programs. Right, there are various programs and protocols that have been built, and so we're kind of exploring those along the lines, and we're gonna continue exploring them.
All right, we got some Axelar in case anything hits the fans. Sonny, do you have anything else for Serge, or should we move on to the Gravity Bridge, folks? We'll keep going in alphabetical order. Gravity Bridge. Are our funds Seifu?
Yeah. So to answer sort of in the reverse order with the question about insurance first. So the Gravity Bridge community could choose to refund bridge issues. I can't speak for them because it is a decentralized community made up of a lot of Cosmos stakeholders, and I believe that's very likely. On speaking on the security side of the discussion, once again, I would like to highlight that of all the bridges here, everybody else is saying, well, we have upgradability because we're not really sure we're ready to be done with it yet. What if we have to change something? We're the only ones here who have made the bet. There is no upgradability. We are confident. So, I mean, vulnerabilities can and do happen, but we're sure that we've done everything that we can, and we've designed a system that is as secure as possible from the ground up and done the hard parts first, not necessarily the spinning realms.
Back to the insurance thing. Did we answer the insurance thing?
Yeah, I answered it first. So I said that Gravity Bridge has a, well, so I didn't answer it quite this way, so let me clarify it some. Gravity Bridge has a large community pool, currently 50% of the token distribution, which could be used to insure funds. This would be up to the token holders of Gravity Bridge to vote for, and I believe it's very likely that they would. But I want to be clear here that there is no one party in control of Gravity Bridge. We're launched. We already have assets bridged to Osmosis. We are very much live and with more than 150 validators. It is a decentralized community now. So I think that's the best answer I can give.
I love it. It's up to the people. It's up to the Grav token holders. Nomad, let's bring you guys down. Are our funds Seifu?
They are Seifu. I also don't know what the acronym stands for, but I'll assume it means safe. So I think Gravity brought up this analogy earlier, but as with any kind of public goods or plumbing or infrastructure, it works best when you don't know that it's working, right? That it just works seamlessly for you and you can do what you need to do. You can use the applications and not worry about the underlying infrastructure. I think being battle tested, as in recovering from an exploit, is the second best thing. You really have to commend the Jump folks for moving quickly and recapitalizing, because the systemic kind of fallout from that would have been huge. And having a trusted party like that is a very important part of having financial controls. But what we do is, because not everybody is backed by a well-capitalized market maker or has lots of VC bags yet, we have to ensure that the community is taking care and watching what happens in the system. Dev in the chat mentioned rate limiting and circuit breakers. We bake that directly into the Nomad protocol. So there is a 30-minute latency when messages get sent across, where as long as one honest party is running a watcher, they can observe and make sure that nothing bad happens. We think these financial controls need to be baked in at the protocol level, rather than just saying, well, it can't be upgraded or we have insurance to be able to back it. So it's part of the protocol design, but of course, having trusted parties, having tested code, and everything surrounding that is an important aspect of making sure funds are Seifu.
I think the other one other note here is just that there are multiple different kinds of security vulnerabilities. There are security vulnerabilities that arise from like the implementation itself, and there are known like practices for how to improve those. There's a fixed process of auditing and bounties and being like safe development guidelines that help us be better at that. But then there's also economic vulnerabilities, and those are really, I think, the longer term things to be concerned about. That like, what is the economic security of the system in the event that a given validator set gets corrupted? And I think that's a trade-off that Nomad takes a lot better than anything else.
All right.
I'll let Hendrik take from the Wormhole side, but I think the chat just dug up. I think the chat just dug up the secured asset fund for users is SAFU. So it's an official emergency fund that's easy designated. All right. So now that we're done with the most important part of this, Hendrik, going to take Wormhole security?
Yeah, sure, I will. I think security, as always, is multidimensional. It comes down to a couple aspects, and I think a lot of them have been mentioned. Obviously, one of them is just we're all building software that is supposed to almost function perfectly, and that we're rolling out. So building the software, launching, we're always talking in the team about like when we're contributing, launching rocket ships, because you can't really fix them when they've launched. You're not going to send a team of mechanics up to fix it while it's flying. There is upgradability, but the protocol is expected to function almost perfectly. So rigorous review processes and audits are important. So with Wormhole, it's gone through multiple and is going through even more audits right now on all chains, and in particular, the contribution processes are very strict, with at least 2 reviews being required and strict review guidelines for the contributors. I think this is one aspect of the thing. The other thing is built-in safeguards. We've heard about a kill switch, the circuit breaker model, etc. For the Wormhole, I think the community is currently evaluating a couple of these mechanisms to get introduced, but this accounting aspect, reducing blast radius, reducing the impact of software being faulty, where there's rarely going to be software that is perfect, is extremely, extremely important. And then on the other side, the monitoring aspect, giving the community the tools to monitor the network, notice discrepancies between, for example, actual backing and wrapped assets, noticing extraordinarily large transfers. Anomaly detection is a standard in traditional industries. It's something that needs to be here as well. And we've contributed a bunch of these tools. A lot of the guardians that are running Wormhole are operating software, are watching, and are well connected. So with our particular incident that we had, we've seen extremely fast reaction, and having them shut down the network temporarily to reduce potential further damage in that case. And I think it's really shown how well the community is prepared for these kind of cases, and just reinforcing that and pushing that forward. I think these 3 aspects are really the core, and we're trying to really push them to the furthest extent on them.
And I just want to just add to that. There's something to be said for a protocol that's been out there for about 12 months now, that has the opportunity to have been battle hardened and have a massive bounty on it. I know folks in the space don't like well-funded entities that come from big backgrounds. It's viewed with skepticism, for good cause, but that also enables us to spend tens of millions of dollars on audits, on security firms. We have an in-house audit team, guys from Mozilla who are coming in and building white hat folks internally. And, of course, we've shown conviction in how much we believe in the code as it stands right now, which should hopefully be a signal to the community. So, yeah, that was my piece.
Nice. Do we have any other comments from the YouTube community? I feel like that's what everyone wants to know. Are our funds safe? Are our funds safe? Which bridges make it easy in practice for Osmosis to control their asset representations and have future flexibility to change its bridge without changing the representation if it ever wants to?
I guess I could take this, where I don't think this onus is on the bridges per se. I think that onus is more on the Osmosis side, where if we it is possible to change the bridge eventually, but it takes a lot of engineering work, which is why it's important to get it right early. But in the case where we need to change it for whatever reason, there I guess like one thing that this is sort of a larger place of the UX, but like I mean one thing is like we would want like some sort of button that makes it easy to like for a user to convert it to the new whatever the new bridge format that we want is to the new bridge token. Or the other option is we do something where I don't know how okay this is, but where the osmosis chain just takes all of the ETH on itself and just like then force changes it to a new bridge representation. But yeah, I don't think that's really differs between bridges. I think that's more of a osmosis development concern.
Ooh, a new one. How does each bridge bound the worst case scenario? What is the worst case scenario, Dev? Does that just mean total hack? Does that just mean all the funds are drained? How do we deal with it, guys? What happens when shit hits the fan? Is that another way to summarize this?
I think the wormhole, you can fake signatures is pretty close to the worst case scenario.
An issue with the wormhole hack that there was no rate limiting. Whoa. So the worst case is 100% breach?
100% DPEG. I think what he's saying is like, I mean, do different bridges plan on offering like rate limiting systems where it's like, okay, is there any good reason why more than 25% of a bridge custody can be like withdrawn in a 24-hour period? Or another one would be what about for stuck funds or like this is more like if you're I've talked about this with the Axelar team before, where it's more like, okay, because currently they're not for like Bitcoin and stuff, they were planning on doing like much more complicated like threshold ECDSA stuff, which it can be a little bit brittle sometimes. And like, do you have like time locked recovery paths where it's like, okay, as long as there's a valid heartbeat going by the decentralized system, that remains like the way. But like, okay, if for some reason the MPC gets fucked up, or like the keys get lost, or something gets stuck, is there a backup recovery to recover stuck funds?
So I guess, I can start with that just quickly. I guess in our contracts, we actually have, rate limiting functionality that sort of right now is not enabled, but it's something, if our community decides and we decide that's needed, we can enable it. I think B, even in our deposit contracts and the way we handle, there is effectively a deposit handler, right, that allows you to kind of customize various policies of what happens with that deposit if it needs to be. So for instance, like a user sends like a RON fund, then you can say, a RON asset, right? Then you can kind of return it back to the user, and the user can claim it back. You can similarly set certain policies that if the Axelar network sort of hasn't picked up, a deposit within a certain time, maybe then the user gets it back. So, I think there's a lot of flexibility and kind of customization there. We I think one thing to keep in mind is like you have to be like really careful about those things, right? And then so we want to be thoughtful about how we approach it, because it does require certain synchronicity assumptions, which you have to satisfy.
Yeah. So in terms of worst case scenario handling for Gravity Bridge, first of all, we have implemented evidence-based slashing. So if anybody submits anything to the bridge that wasn't a signature produced by consensus, that validator can be immediately kicked out of the set, and the bridge will then be immediately updated to take them out. So essentially, this is a system to prevent even attempts at bridge hijacking, because as you try to collect those signatures, they're like radioactive. You can submit them to slash people for enormous amounts and kick them out of the bridge set. So even somebody just trying to put together those signatures, that would be very dangerous information to hand to somebody. So then sort of the next layer of protection is that we have that we do a lot of defense in depth in the actual blockchain logic. If any number is out of place or out of the way, we do halt the bridge at that point. And we have a preference for halting if things become inconsistent. And this is one of the bigger advantages of advantages of an independent bridge chain is that we don't have to worry about halting other logic, other DeFi apps. We can say, okay, guys, it's time to stop and take care of this. Now, we don't have any transfer limits. We could implement them. But the problem with transfer limits is that they're just as much of a liveness problem as halting the chain when things go strange anyways. Because what if somebody tries to lock up the bridge by depositing a ton of money and then withdrawing it right away? And like, you've hit your withdrawal cap. You need to do a lot of engineering to be sure that a transfer limit is not going to become a liveness problem in and of itself. So keeping with our larger philosophy, we have opted with simpler, more direct trigger methods for security issues. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to bring up for this question.
All right. Nomad?
Cool. So I think the question is on two fronts. What is the worst case scenario? And also what happens if the bridge gets stuck?
Got it.
On the first one, yes, of course, we already saw what happens when the worst case scenario happened. Rate limiting is one solution. I think another thing to consider is debouncing. You can kind of analogize the Nomad dispute window to a debouncer, where you are using that latency to be able to inspect and make sure that nothing wonky happens. And of course, building up observability systems, having aligned parties run watchers. I think all of these teams will be focused on doing that to implement those financial controls going into the future. But I think relevant to the stuck bridge issue, it comes back to the scalability or overhead of the solution being implemented. I agree with what Justin said, which is better than having just a general purpose chain being a bridge specific chain is useful. But even better is not having a chain at all, because there is a lot of overhead with having multiple validators that need to be coordinated, not only in the case of something unplanned happening, but for things like planned upgrades. And so what happens if something happens and there's a liveness failure on the Nomad bridge? Well, we can just rotate the updater and have that one party maintain liveness and have that party changed. So the lightweight nature of having just one party being the external verifier and kind of pushing the fraud and validation to the watchers is kind of the approach we've taken.
And then Wormhole. Guys, what happens when shit hits the fan?
Well,
Just to say it as bluntly as possible, right? That's what we're all really concerned with.
Yeah. Well, I'll ignore the obvious since we already talked about that like 3 times. But we're talking about rate limits and things of that sort. Those are like obvious things that you add into like trading risk engines, right? Like this is problems that trading firms have battled for 2 decades at this point across withdrawals, deposits, across exchanges, across gateways, across all these things. And traditionally, defense in depth is like the obvious security practice to always maintain. With smart contracts, more depth means more code, and that means then there's another smart contract that's not written perfectly, and trusting people to write perfect code is always hard, right? And that's why the design principle has always been minimizing lines of code. Now that being said, of course we're like thinking about rate limits, but of course we're thinking about potential cold storage, potential, there's all these different designs that you can come through and you can ideate on. At the end of the day, it comes down to that trade-off of complexity versus, all these other controls in space. And so I don't think there's an obvious answer. That's my take. But Henrik, if you want to add anything.
I agree. I think in the community, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about the rate limiting, etc. It's just in a decentralized world, no KYC. If you set certain limits above which you start to debounce or slow down transfers, people are going to make a lot of very small transfers. If I can make $10 on a $1 transfer, I will make a lot of these in a very short amount of time. At the same time, introducing global limits, I think Justin already said it, you have a liveness risk. And when we're talking about token bridges here, people move around assets to trade. And if there are people moving assets to trade, then there's money to be made in hindering them from doing their trades. So there's a lot of economic risk in that as well. And liveness is really an important aspect of such a bridging system, particularly when you bridge to something like Osmosis, where a lot of what is happening is trading. So I think, again, observability and community awareness is extremely important. And then reducing blast radius of L1s. failing, because we're going to see that happening. I'm very sure there's somewhere in the next 10 years, we're going to see an L1 being compromised, not just for the L1, but for the cross-chain damage it can cause. And I think the Wormhole community, I hope, will be in the position to defend against that through the mechanisms I mentioned before.
Out of all the pitches, which does Sunny think integrates with Osmosis the cleanest? Oh, wow. This is, I feel like this is a pretty big question here.
I guess.
Just say it right now in front of all of them.
I think by cleanest, I mean, I think that we can talk mostly about, I'm going to assume that means kind of like UX wise. I would say, I think, one thing that we've like been stressing a lot is that we care a lot about direct deposits, where users shouldn't have to make transactions on any intermediary chain. Users should just be able to go, Ethereum straight to Osmosis. And as of right now, I believe the only one that supports that is Axelar. We've built a module called BEC32 IBC, which is something that any Cosmos SDK chain can import and use to make it easier to do cross-chain multi-hop thing. So you can. So I know the Gravity Bridge team is in the process of integrating that right now. I don't know exactly what the roadmap is for Evmos to support multi-hop. Maybe Pranay can talk about that. And then for Wormhole, Wormhole is interesting because we're not actually going to be interacting. From my understanding, it's most likely we're not going to interact with them via IBC, but rather via like Osmosis CosmWasm. So they would be, issuing tokens directly onto Osmosis via CosmWasm. And so, interestingly, I actually don't know how to compare how that UX is going to be. It is a very different UX than the rest of them that we have to deal with, which is potentially okay. There's a little bit of with the Wormhole side, there's a little bit of work that's going to have to be done, where one of the things on Osmosis is we don't support CW20 tokens. We only allow for native coins. And so we've actually built a module that allows CosmWasm tokens to mint and burn native coins, but we're just going to have to, that will take a little bit of work to modify, the work that Wormhole has done on Terra to fit with Osmosis. And also
let me throw one thing in, Sunny. Actually, we've also built a Cosmos SDK module for both Wormhole Core and the Token Bridge. Given we're maybe building our own the Wormhole chain for Cosmos, so that's obviously always an option for like the closest integration possible.
Amazing. Okay, even better. Cool. And then I don't know, Pranay. I'll have another question after this, but like Pranay, I don't know, what's the status on like Evmos multi-hop?
Yeah, so I think I talked to Liam and Fede about this, and I think they would love to support that, where there is this module in Evmos that combines the Nomad transfer into Evmos as a staging zone with IBC automatically, so that users don't have to send another transaction from Evmos over to Osmosis. And so I think they're very much aligned with that, because there is, Sunny, when we talked last time, you brought up the element of it's a bit of a risk to have an intermediary chain in the way that could have its own AMM or take advantage of the liquidity. And from talking to the Evmos team, they are super incentive aligned to try and grow liquidity within all of the Cosmoverse, rather than just try and build a fiefdom within Evmos. I think they're really keen on displaying that, and part of it would be having this type of module to route it. I think the two other things to consider is we can also do something similar to Wormhole, where once we have the WASM contracts, we can go directly to Osmosis. I also want to plug Connext here, because I think Connext obviates the need to use the settlement layer, and provided there's the liquidity already, users can swap directly between Osmosis and elsewhere.
Right. Functionally, as a user, you are always going point to point. Like the Connext LPs are the ones that are on the back end dealing with like the multi-hop process of getting liquidity around and taking the risk of that. So as a user, it would never actually make any difference.
So I guess like one other piece that related, another part about the previous question is that, one of the UX flows that we want to support on Osmosis is whenever possible, is actually just using the deposit withdraw buttons on the Osmosis site. And like, in the short term, it's okay, I think, for us to link to an external bridge site, but ideally we want that entire user flow to stay on the Osmosis site and not have to send users to a external site to do the bridging. So most of the bridges right now basically have like one front end that you can use to interact with them. Are there plans on who's going to make it easiest for us to just give us an API that we can plug into our front end?
So
Doug,
we already
I
have
think.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think everyone is going to do that for what it's worth.
Yeah,
Okay.
for what it's worth, on our side, we already have this. On Moonbeam, there have been a couple AMMs that have already used the Nomad SDK to build the bridging functionality directly into their web app. So we're really keen on this, and it echoes what I said earlier, where like we want to just be the settlement layer. Like part of calling out this modular interoperability stack is we don't like ideally users will not interact with Nomad and they'll use Connext, and better yet, they'll use Connext's APIs embedded within different applications that they care about. And even crazier, hopefully they'll just do it in their wallet, right? And be connected to the applications within the wallet itself. Part of kind of when we're talking about UX, if we are sacrificing security to make premature UX optimizations, I think that is a bad play, because you can always make UX better provided that the security limit or what the substrate upon which you're building the security of that can be improved. If the substrate fundamentally is insecure, then it doesn't matter how good the UX is. And so I just want people to kind of weigh that and know that UX, direct deposits, things like that can always be added over time.
I actually, sorry, I just want to like step in here a little bit, because I think fundamentally, we're talking about different assumptions, right? Like BFT, like consensus versus, whatever optimistic consensus. I have a lot of respect for the team, but that being said, the assumption that we're making are the following: you have effectively assuming liveness of certain nodes to guarantee safety. Okay, so when you're going back to the example that Sunny brought up with 20 validators and 95% threshold, in a bridge system like all the other ones we're talking about, if the validators are down under denial of service attack, you just lose liveness. In optimistic protocols, you lose safety. And that's something we have not experienced with, we have not experimented, and I think is actually something we have to keep in mind. So I think saying that sort of it's more secure because 1 out of n, you making very strong assumptions, okay, that liveness guarantees safety.
This is actually false. I don't think this analysis is correct. In the Axelar case, a majority of validators can create an invalid update. If you are a single chain, it is true that basically breaking consensus or 51% attacking the chain can produce an invalid update, but then that creates a fork of the chain. So in theory, the minority fork can fork away and retain value, and you can basically persist through an attack. For a cross-chain system, that's not true, because the state of the attack that you do is now injected into the state of the subsequent chain, and subsequent chain kind of just believes whatever it gets. So what this means is like, if the validator set of a validator set bridge gets compromised, you could potentially create value out of nowhere, or even more troublingly, if the origin chain itself gets 51% attacked, that can spoof data through the validator set bridge, or through really, I guess, any bridge, and bring that data to like a receiving chain. In the Nomad case, it's a little bit different, where it's true that you are making this 1 of n assumption, and that 1 of n assumption has basically has like liveness considerations around a potential DOS vector. However, if you can disincentivize DOS cost of DOSing the underlying chain anyway, then the economic scalability of that system is much better, because the cost to attack that system is basically the cost to figure out that there is not a single person in the world anonymously running a watcher, and the cost of that is uncapped.
So yeah, I mean, we can go through this, I think, for many hours. I think again, I think the point to make is that it is a liveness assumption that nodes are making progress as somebody submits a fraud proof, which ensures safety. Okay, where it comes from, economic security and so on and so forth, it's an external object, and I think that's important to understand the distinction.
Until we have permissionless watchers, I actually do think that the security is actually better on the BFT system, on the multi-sig system. Once we get permissionless watchers, then I have to think about how does this economic security here work and stuff. But until then, I think
this is basically the same argument as saying, okay, until we build layer 2 systems for blockchains that allow them to scale, that are fundamentally open and permissionless, sidechains are better because you can make sure that the economic security of the sidechain is better than the economic security of this of the system that is heading towards trust minimization. But it's
you're talking to the person that spent 4.5 years building sidechains, because I thought that's the fastest way to move forward.
And I get that, and I think that's fair. But I'm just saying, there is clearly value attached to shared economic security, right? I mean, even the Cosmos ecosystem is cognizant of this and heading towards it.
So this is a good question that kind of goes into, I think that in the Cosmos ecosystem, we have a slightly different approach to how we do economic security, right? Where we're pushing towards a world of multilateral shared security style systems, right? Where I think one of the things is the Gravity Bridge wants to do shared security with the Cosmos Hub. So, it actually will effectively be secured by the Cosmos Hub rather than, they can get more and more security from other chains. They could get security from Osmosis. They could get security from the Hub. I think really Cosmos is going to turn into a mesh of security. Yep.
And that's what I like about it. That's actually the reason why I'm so bullish on IBC as a concept, for instance, is because you can leverage the underlying security of the validator sets of these chains, and if they have shared security, even better. But I think the point that we're trying to make here is that if you are a chain that is trying to connect to another chain, mm-hmm. At best, your security assumptions are the security assumption of your chain and the security assumption of another chain. But if you're introducing another validator set bridge in between, you are now introducing another set of security assumptions separate from those two.
I think this whole discussion of security assumptions sort of leaves out, we talk about security assumptions built into the model and in the chain. But while we talk about this, there's multi-sigs for updating these contracts that are often quite small and have no economic security. So, I mean, they don't have that same understanding of economic security. So, I mean, we can go back and forth about what model is the most possibly secure, or we can evaluate from the lowest number of people it takes to compromise the bridge. And I definitely respect progressive decentralization. But how often do projects say okay, this is the point, we're done, we're taking out, no more upgradability? Unless you do the hard part first, it's very hard to do it later, because you want to keep on adding complexity, and you don't want to say, okay, now is the day that we're going to put an end to upgradability.
Justin, do you think that time locked upgradability is okay? You say that, oh, okay, look, the chain halted, or the bridge halted, or the chain halted. We can have, as long as there's not as long as there's a heartbeat going on, then it's okay to keep the chain, no upgradability allowed. But if the heartbeat stops, then you allow a multi-sig to step in and save things, or maybe the multi-sig can make a thing saying that hey, we would like to change this contract within 1 month from now, and then the validators, the more decentralized set, can veto that process. Do you think that those kind of things are okay?
Yeah. So, and sorry, not yet your question. That's a little bit more nuanced, but that's a good question. So that's something. So that came up during our audit, of course. It's how can we do can we do upgrades? And we really explored this possibility. The problem with time locks comes down to censorship and potentially, you have sort of Nomad's problem, but with the entire value of the bridge comes an issue. Also, you have the potential for forks, which combined with time locks gets really weird. It becomes almost impossible to reason about. So when it comes to upgradability, I think nothing short of the full consensus set voting on an upgrade is really the best way, is like really not compromising, or how should I put it? The upgrade should have the same security as your system does, period, which in the case of Gravity Bridge would mean the entire validator set approving it. So I think that's a generalizable rule. And then and in terms of like, could you maybe come up with a way where it would be okay to upgrade? You probably could, but we instead decided to have more of like an accretion model where we continue to add functionality that integrates with the existing contract rather than have an upgrade system built into the contract. Less lines of code and less solidity is always better.
Just a note here, I think I do think this is a really important point around upgradability. I'd like to point out that, like, obviously systems have to upgrade, like even TCP/IP has to upgrade. Even like lower level internet protocols have been considered for upgrades or have had to go through very painful long upgrades. The only mechanisms that we've seen so far for upgrades in distributed systems that seem to work and have worked and remain decentralized long term are like upgrades via like forking and like hard forks and consensus. I think specifically because it gives one of two options, which is like people either go along with the upgrade or fork into something else, and so you have that option to exit. And there are ways to like design all of these systems so that they work that way. It's not difficult.
All right. Can we use multiple bridges for mutually exclusive?
To make sure that we got on the point on the SDK. I know we said everyone's going to have it. I also wanted to point out that Wormhole already has a very mature SDK that's used by 3 major exchanges, wallets, Jump's internal coin transfer tool, and a bunch of other spaces. So, and another layer 1 is data.bridge.money is integrating it into the front end and should be pretty straightforward to do. So, just wanted to make that be known before we jump to the next one.
No worries.
Well, I'll just ask, like, so, for the Gravity Bridge team, I know that they don't have an API yet. What would be sort of the expected timeline for something like that?
We'll have the first part of that, which is deposit address forwarding, up by the end of the month. And then for the other direction, we're going to work towards interchain security. So once again, we have a very strong decentralization stance there, in that we're not going to run API servers, and we're not going to build anything that relies on that. So that means that we're working on making simple on-chain APIs, which is interchain security on one end and forwarded deposits using Batch32 IBC from the Osmosis team on the other.
Okay. But I guess by API I meant more like an SDK or client libraries that we can use.
Client library, yeah. So they'll be out as soon as those features are actually deployed. We have guides for front end TypeScript, and also Rust out, and of course Go is sort of built into the system. So I think that's fairly decent, and that'll all be packaged into a proper SDK as soon as the features are out. So once again, into this month for Ethereum to Osmosis, and hopefully as soon as we can reasonably get interchain accounts deployed for the other direction, which I'm hoping is fairly quickly, maybe 2 months. Yeah, we'll see. I'm a little less confident in that timeline, but I hope so.
Nice. Okay, so for this question, can we use multiple bridges of mutually exclusive tokens? I think that yes. That's. Oh, sorry, Coney, you can say it if you want.
No, I'm just here. I'm just here to hang out. I just have to say, I love how honest Justin is with timelines. As far as like, he gives a very honest. It's going to happen soon. Can we use multiple bridges for exclusive tokens? What are exclusive tokens? Hot items that are only available on one single bridge. Exclusive.
So okay, I think the answer to that is yes. We definitely can use multiple tokens for different tokens for different bridges. different bridges for different tokens. I would say that the caveat that like the fewer bridges we can use and like spend integration time, the better, right? Like I think it would be nice to be able to use a fewer number and not have to integrate like 5 different things and reason about all of them. But that, I think that okay, there's 2 parts here. There's different ecosystems. I think at the very least, ideally, we'd probably want to use one bridge for all EVMs. Like we probably don't want to do like one bridge for Ethereum and then a different set of bridges for like other EVM chains. I think that is definitely a little bit silly. I would say that when we're talking about multiple ecosystems, I think that's where multiple bridges might make sense. I think different bridges, different bridge providers have different core competencies and like, I mean, as an example, I think on this panel right now, Wormhole is the only one that supports Solana at all here, right? So I think that like, even if we don't use Wormhole for like the EVM bridge, unless someone else has a Solana implementation in the next like 2 months, like I think, we probably will need to integrate with Wormhole no matter what for Solana. So I think that's like, something like that. And then the other part is I think there are like sometimes like what I'd call like edge case tokens that we would have to do another bridge for. So an example would actually be if people saw on the Osmosis front end, there's the P-Stake token, which actually came via the Gravity bridge to persistence. But what we had told, and this was sort of like a special request to us from the persistence team. They said like, hey, can you please add this? Because, we just did this airdrop and we want to make sure it has liquidity. The IBC deposits don't work, but that's for an edge case. That's for a separate reason. But, what we had told them was like, hey, we are not going to bring P-Stake directly from Gravity yet because we have not made our bridge decision. But you can bring it from, if you want to, we'll treat P-Stake as a native token of persistence. So if you build the UI and integration work and like the user flows to allow users to bring P-Stake from, because P-Stake originates on Ethereum. If you build the user flow to help users get P-Stake from Ethereum onto persistence, then yes, we will allow users to deposit it only from persistence to Osmosis. And so that's like sort of technically like an edge case where, we're already using a Gravity Bridge token, but it's like for that specific, special cased token. I think that, the decision that we're making on the shelling point, making here is really a shelling point for what we would use for more generalized Ethereum assets, sort of like, what will be used for ETH and DAI and all these other things. If there's any like special requests and stuff, I'm sure we can use alternative bridges for special cases like that.
Rad. Well, gang, I think we're here. We're almost approaching the 3-hour mark. We're almost at the Lord of the Rings director's cut. So I think we're gonna wrap everything up. But thank you guys. Thank you to all of our bridge provider friends. Thanks for taking 3 whole hours out of your day to pop on over here. Sonny, do you have any last remarks you want to?
Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit quickly about like the process and what's next now. I think I think this was primarily like an information gathering process. I know we asked you guys to write the RFPs, but I think I think video is also a good medium for more people to consume. And so this was sort of more of a way to like get more information out to the Osmosis community. Now from here, I think we have to figure it, eventually we have to make a decision, and we have to like figure out what's the process for like making this decision. I think Stevie Wolf had made a proposal on the Commonwealth, which was, we do some sort of on-chain voting system. One annoying thing is Cosmos SDK does not have default governance module does not have multiple choice voting yet, which is, so Stevie has this like whole proposal of like, okay, we're gonna make like 4 different proposals, one for each bridge, and then we're going to do like some sort of approval voting. And if any 2 of them, like top 2, are within so you can vote for yes on multiple of like which ones are you okay with, and then if any of them are in like a similar bound, we do like some sort of runoff poll where you only vote for one of them. I don't know. It'll be weird. We have to figure it out. But I think if anyone has any proposals for other ways to go about this process, please propose them on the forum. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's So stay tuned for more details on like the process that we're going to use, and I think we're probably going to definitely, hopefully, we definitely want to make this decision within the next like week or 2 instead of continuously like kicking the can down the road. Really, this discussion started like 2 weeks ago, but Superfluid got everything delayed. But yeah.
By the way, your hair looks awesome. It looks real nice.
Thank you.
Real nice.
I was really scared when I saw that you didn't have hair. That was a great sign up.
I actually changed my
marketing
beginning of COVID, and I was like, when I just when COVID started, I was like, oh, no one's ever going to see me like this. Let me see what it looks like. I didn't like it, so that's why I was extra motivated to ship Superfluid.
And it shipped on time. Hell yeah. All right. Well, Bridge friends, thank you guys so much. As Sunny said, we're going to, make a bunch of proposals and vote yes, no with veto abstain on all of them, and then hopefully whittle us down to one bridge provider, with the exception of exclusive tokens per Michael's comment. We might have another bridge for exclusive tokens. Who knows? But until then, does anyone have any last words that they want to say? Split second. You got 5 seconds of airtime.
Thank you for having us.
Not a second more.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys.
Thanks so much.